all just they will also, no problem. Introduction not required, I think, because 7 minutes.
Okay.
Whatever affiliation they have, otherwise their name and title is enough.
Okay.
All just which one you are host? But convener, then you be host, na? You manage that. It is all live, already live. Convener में कहाँ है आप? अच्छा, okay, मैं host कर लूँ, okay? वो manage करो, वो थोड़ा program देख के वो host कर लूँ, okay? बना दिया.
So what I'm thinking is, since there is paucity of time, we will start right away. And Himangshi, the speakers can introduce themselves in 1 minute and start speaking. Will that be fine?
That will be fine, but I think Iram is there to introduce you.
Okay, Iram is there. Okay, great.
Okay, shall we start now?
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Iram, you can start.
Yes, sir. So today's session will be on literature and migration, and it will be chaired by Dr. Nandini Sen, who teaches English in Bharati College, Delhi University in India. She was fellow at the prestigious Indian Institute of Advanced Study in Shimla. She is the recipient of the Charles Wallace Fellowship for Academic Research in London and the Ambassador for Peace Prize for her work towards educating slum dwellers and the Write India Award for her creative writing. She writes in diaspora studies, African studies, and comparative literature. And some of her academic publications include The Black Woman Speaks, a study of Flora Nwapa and Buchi Emekata through the Diasporic Lens, volumes 1 and 2, and Mahashweta Devi's Critical Perspectives. It's over to Dr. Nandini Sen, and hope we have a great session.
Thank you so much, Iram, for that lovely introduction. And welcome to all the participants here. This is an amazing conference where we have people participating from across the globe, from different time zones. So it is my proud privilege that GRFDT has given me this chance to chair this session on literature and diaspora, something which is very close to my heart. So the very first speaker we have, the speakers will please remember that you have 7 minutes of speaking time. And Iram, will you do their introductions, or should they just introduce themselves, just one line, and they start with the presentations? So I think Himangshi, we will start with you. Iram, that's fine if they introduce themselves at that 1 minute and then start.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So Himangshi, over to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Himangshi, the floor, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, is my PPT visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Himanshi Chandravanshi. and I am currently working as a lecturer in Government College for Women Parade in Jammu and Kashmir in India. The title of my today's presentation is Generational Differences and Intergenerational Discord in I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. The paper is based on the premise that migrants' lives are fraught with tension and strife, and among the many contentious issues affecting migrants' lives, generational differences and the resultant intergenerational discord remains fundamental. The conflict arises as the first generation clings to the homeland values and the second generation, as a result of their increased interaction with the hostland culture, shows an enthusiastic acceptance of it. Julia in I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, in spite of living in the United States, is expected to follow the homeland practices by her mother, illustrating generational difference and intergenerational discord. The paper adopts the following theoretical strands. Gloria Anzaldúa in Borderlands argues that culture expects women to show greater acceptance of and commitment to the value system than men, and culture which is made by men, as they possess all the power and they are the ones to make the rules and laws, and women merely transmit those rules and laws. Shirley J. Lim in Feminist and Ethnic Theories in Asian American Literature highlights that, I quote, inevitable conflicts occur within each woman simultaneously with external difficulties in her role as obedient daughter and independent individual, unquote. Then Madeline Halter in What's New About the New Immigration, Traditions and Transformations in the United States since 1965 also underscores that issues of discipline and respect are among the sources of tension because parents often expect a level of respect, deference, and obedience from their children to whom respect and obedience seem authoritarian and domineering. In the novel I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, Julia is a 15-year-old Mexican-American girl living in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. When the novel opens, she is living with her parents and has recently lost her elder sister Olga in a road accident. Julia is independent-minded and is of a rebellious nature and is no way the one to adhere to family values like Olga. In the novel, Olga's passing away initiates a crisis situation in Julia's life, as at once the responsibility to look after her parents in a manner similar to her elder sister Olga falls upon her. Now, the novel also discusses or it talks about parental control and how it leads to estrangement between Julia and her mother or between Julia and her parents. Julia is always under surveillance of her mother. However, having been raised in the American culture or in America, Julia claims privacy as her right, which her mother refutes, and she is labeled as, I quote, too Americanized, quote unquote, too Americanized. And against Julia's claim to privacy, her mother retorts by bringing out the underlying generational difference. I quote, privacy, I never had any privacy when I was a girl. You kids here think you can do whatever you want, unquote. Now, the conflict between the mother and daughter illustrates what James Locke in Immigration in America Today argues, I quote, older immigrants usually experience frustration and stress as young family members start adopting American values such as individualism and the right to make their decisions, unquote. So as Julia asserts her claim to independence and her right to privacy and individualism, these attributes, they are not appreciated by her mother, and it basically denotes how cultural difference is there between the mother and the daughter. The novel also deals with the issue of disrespect, how individualism on the part of Julia, how it is perceived as disrespectful by her parents. So her claims to right to freedom and privacy seem disrespectful to not only to her parents, but also to her older cousins. Julia is defined as being allergic to rules and she is inquisitive. And all these attributes are opposite to what actually is expected from her being a young Mexican woman. It is for the same reason that one of her cousins actually remarks that she can barely speak Spanish and this country is ruining her. This actually makes her mother very disappointed in Julia, and she laments that, I quote, I didn't raise my children to be disrespectful Why are you like this? What have I done to deserve this? Unquote. As a result, Julia faces constant threats of being sent back to Mexico as a sort of punishment, which again illustrates or substantiates what James Locke in Immigration in America Today argues, I quote, family discord among the foreign-born is common as younger family members aspire to participate in America's youth-oriented culture, making the immigrant parents feel that their authority is undermined by American norms and laws when they cannot discipline their children in the way they think best, leading them to rigorously worry about the corrupting influences of American culture, unquote. The novel also highlights Julia's mother's insistence on preserving her premarital virginity, and something which Julia does not approve of, being a second generation young girl raised in the American culture and values. So Julia's mother insists on preserving her virginity as premarital sex is seen as culturally transgressive, particularly in the Mexican culture, which again illustrates cultural control on the part of her mother. It is because of the fear that we'd get molested or have sex that the sisters were never allowed to sleep anywhere else, not even with our cousins, as Julia says, which again emphasizes what Philip Swanson in the Companion to Latin American Studies has to argue. I quote, in Latin America, women's sexuality has been marginalized, and women with an overt sexual identity have tended to be viewed as transgressive. This has happened due to the impact of Catholicism and the emphasis on the figure of the Virgin Mary, leading to a negative interpretation of active female sexuality, unquote. It is because of the same reason that Julia experiences guilt after she has sex with her American boyfriend. Now, the discord characterizing the mother-daughter relationship as far as preserving or not preserving the so-called premarital virginity is concerned, it culminates as Julia's mother discovers box of condoms while going through Julia's personal belongings. And upon this horrific discovery, the mother severely punishes, and I quote from the text, already taken away my phone, decided to ransack my room to make sure I didn't have anything else that might be considered scandalous or immoral, unquote. Julia is locked up in her room, leading to severe depression and anxiety. Now, the novel also discusses how Julia desires or she longs for independence, and how that freedom, how their desire for independence or their desire for freedom is constantly negated by her family. Neha Tran in Handbook of Mental Health and Acculturation in Asian American Families highlights, and I quote, Latin American cultures emphasize interdependence and interpersonal harmony among family members, where parent-child bond is more hierarchical and lifelong, unquote. In the novel, Julia wants to move away. She wants to go to college and wants to become a writer. She does not want to live in Chicago in that poor neighborhood, as she feels that she cannot grow there. She wants to be a writer, but the family negates Julia's aspirations. I quote from the text, the family says, you know, without family, you won't make it in this life, unquote. She is further reminded that in her sister's absence, and now that she is older, she has, I quote, to learn how to be a nice senorita, just like her sister, just like your sister, unquote. So to conclude, the paper underscores, it highlights generational differences and the intergenerational discord, which is clearly exemplified through Julia's discord with her parents, primarily in her interaction with her mother. As things worsen following her elder sister Olga's death, Julia finds it increasingly difficult to strike a balance between the contradictory demands of the two cultures. Olga's death leaves a void in the family, which Julia is expected to fill. Coupled with that, there is the constant effort on the part of her mother to impose conservative Mexican norms on Julia, which Julia finds stifling. Julia consistently resists her mother's desire to raise her as per the traditional Mexican norms and actively asserts her independence and individuality. This leads to a prolonged intergenerational discord between Julia and her mother, which does not exhibit any positive signs towards reconciliation. And for the most part, in the narrative, Julia's relationship with her mother is marked by estrangement, and it clearly exhibits intergenerational discord and the generational difference. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you so much, Himanshi. And I think what we'll do is at the end of, after everyone has spoken is when we'll take the questions and when we'll have a discussion. So I'm holding on to my thoughts on your paper.
Okay, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
So thanks so much. So we move now to the next speaker. In my list, Medha Bhattacharya is the next speaker, but I don't see her here. Medha, are you there? Okay, so we move to the person after that. Who's Richa Sharma? Richa, are you there? Dear me. Nimisha Yadav? It can't be that none of the... Okay, Mainak Patatunda is here. I can see him.
Yes,
So, Moinak, maybe you get started while the others join in.
sure, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Slightly soft. Is Moinak audible to everyone?
Yes, she's audible.
Okay, Moinak, please get started.
Okay, great. So, since I'm speaking from India, very good evening to you, ma'am, the chair. And also, I wish to extend a very good evening to all those present here, my esteemed co-speakers, the rapporteurs, and others who are present. I am Mainak Patatunda. I teach in Krishnagar Government College, which is situated in West Bengal. And I'm an assistant professor of political science. Now, my paper, two things first. First thing is that I don't have a PPT. I will just present on my own. I will speak. And secondly, I know my paper has been placed in a panel which is titled, I think, Literature and Society, Literature and Migrant Societies, yes. But I'm a student of international relation political science. I don't have anything to offer in terms of literature and the beauty of it. But still, I think what I am going to delve into can offer some interesting points and something to think about. So my paper deals with Afghan Hindus and Afghan Sikhs and their plight, not only regarding the situation which has now arisen after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, but also about the kind of situation they were facing since the late 1980s and even from the 1970s. And I will try to show why these Afghan Hindus and Sikhs ended up there in the first place, and then how they sought refuge in India and some even in Pakistan after the first Soviet invasion, let's say Soviet invasion in Afghanistan began, and even after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan for the very first time, and how they were rejected and how they were marginalized even in India, which they considered as their new home country, their new homeland, and how that feeling of rejection finally led them to find or to try to find asylum in European countries such as Germany and also in some countries like UAE and Canada and USA. So since my paper particularly deals with the German situation, I will come to that shortly. But first, a very concise introduction to the status of Sikhs and Hindus in Germany. So Hindus, or let's say like Indian Hindus, are living in Afghanistan, the land presently called Afghanistan, for thousands of years. The land was previously called Gandhara, and we have an entire school of Indian architecture, which is called the Gandhara architecture style. So therefore, the connection is very old. But presently, let's say before 1978, about 70,000 to 1 lakh Hindus and Sikhs were living in Afghanistan. They were mostly based in the city of Kabul. Some were based in Jalalabad. Some were based in some other semi-rural areas. But mostly they were based in Kabul and Jalalabad. And they were affluent people. They were mostly merchants. They were traders. They were landowners. They owned houses, cars, property. And they were actually pretty well off during 1929 to 1978, the period of kingship rule in Afghanistan of King Jaid Shah. Now, in 1979, the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan began. And with that, the status of these Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan began to change. Since the politics of the land became very unstable, and since the Mujahideen, they came to play an important part in Afghan politics, these Hindus and Sikhs, they finally thought of leaving their own homeland. And this is the period from where they start, let's say, seeking. But the situation deteriorated particularly after 1989, when Gorbachev, who became the then premier of Soviet Union, he decided to pull the Russian army out of Afghanistan. And after 89 to 92, this was a very dark period for the Indians living there, for the Hindus and Sikhs living there, because there was no proper governmental system that was existing there in Afghanistan. And after 94, the Taliban finally took over from the government of Najibullah. It finally took over in 94. And after 94, the flow of Afghan asylum seekers increased manifold to India and to other nations. Now, this was the situation in Afghanistan. Now, what happened was that India has a very curious policy regarding refugees. India did not sign the 1951 agreement about refugees. It did not sign the 1967 protocol on the status of refugees. Therefore, in India, even if you are considered legally a refugee, you cannot actually find work here. You cannot get a job. So you have to subsist on whatever the government is providing to you. You have to subsist on doles, basically. That in itself became a huge problem for the Afghans who are seeking asylum in India. And many of them did not even get that status. Since India wanted to keep the Afghan government in good humor, because India ever considered and still considered Afghanistan as an important piece of geopolitical territory against Pakistan in that particular region. Therefore, India did not want to declare most of those refugees as refugees, because that would mean that the government in Afghanistan have somehow failed the Hindus and Sikhs who are living there. Therefore, only about 15,000 of the lakhs of people who are seeking asylum in India from Afghanistan, the Hindus and Sikhs, only about 15,000 of them actually got an UNHCR identity card, which enabled them for a prolonged stay in India. The others did not get it. Therefore, from 6 months to 10 years, these people tried to find work in India. They tried to assimilate in India, but they could not. And after that only, these people wanted to seek asylum into other European countries and to USA and Canada. Now, why Germany? Let me tell you that Germany hosts the largest settlement of Afghan Hindus and Sikhs in the world. Okay, now why Germany? Why Germany was chosen? The principal reason being that German laws regarding immigration and settlement of refugees was much better than the other options that these people had. Till 1993, according to German constitution, any person who was fleeing religious persecution could find asylum in Germany, and the German government had a robust resettlement plan for these refugees who are fleeing because of religious persecution. Therefore, Germany became a destination of choice. And the situation was so good initially for these Afghan refugees, Hindus and Sikhs, that they built their own temples in several Afghan German cities like Cologne and Bonn and Dusseldorf. And in these cities, sizable number of Afghan Hindu and Sikh population can still be observed. But this situation changed since 2012 and especially after 2015. Now, what caused this change? This change of German state's attitude towards the refugees in general and to Afghan Sikhs and Hindu refugees in particular. This was the Syrian refugee crisis, which hit Europe hard from 2014 to 2015. Actually, the situation was becoming quite bad from 2010 itself, when the volatile political situation in the Middle East was driving a lot of people from those countries to Europe, to different countries of Europe, especially Italy, Greece, Hungary, and Germany, these 4 countries. Now, out of these 4 countries, Germany was the most accepting. In fact, German Chancellor, the ex-German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, she declared famously in 2015 that we can do it, meaning that the Germans can actually solve this refugee problem by taking in as many refugees as possible from other belly-guarded European nations which could not accommodate them. But this policy kind of backfired, because the common German people now started seeing the refugees as a threat. In 2015 alone, almost 1.3 million Syrian refugees found asylum in Germany. Now that caused some demographic destabilization in certain German cities. Already, people from Turkey are an important group of refugees in Germany. So, along with the Turks, now there were the Afghan Hindus, the Afghan Sikhs, and they were the Syrians, and even some people from Libya. Now the German neo-right wing, the new right-wing politics started to gain some traction in Germany. And these people started demanding that the refugees be ousted from Germany and Germany should return to its own native culture. In 2016, the European Union entered an agreement with the then Hamid Karzai government in Afghanistan. According to this agreement, an unlimited number of Afghan Hindu and Sikh refugees could be deported back to Afghanistan in lieu of developmental assistance to Afghanistan, billions of dollars in aid, unchecked aid, which could be actually pocketed by the Karzai administration and nothing else. So the process began. In 2016, this agreement was signed. Further agreement took place in Munich, I think in 2017. And after that, thousands of refugees were sent back to Afghanistan, where immediately under the Karzai administration, mind you, not under the Taliban, not under the Mujahideen, but under the Hamid Karzai administration, these people faced discrimination immediately. I can tell you a story of one particular Afghan Hindu person who was deported in 2018. And this person had a good life in Germany. He secured a job. He had a family. This person was separated from his family. He was sent in a special charter plane to Afghanistan along with some other refugees. The moment he entered Afghanistan, the only place he could find a safe refuge in was a dilapidated temple, the only Hindu temple now standing in Kabul called the Asamai temple. He had to find a place in there. And as far as I know, the last information that I know, that person is still living 1 meal a day inside that temple. Therefore, the situation is very bad.
Not, Professor Moinat, but you better get to your conclusion because the time is running out.
Surely, ma'am. Surely. Thank you. I'm almost at the end. So the thing is, after the Taliban takeover, or let's say the re-takeover of Afghanistan, the government in Germany actually had to think twice of their policy of deportation, because now, of course, Taliban government themselves, they cannot guarantee that they will provide any kind of safety for the repatriated Afghan Hindus and Sikhs. Although the Taliban government is asking the Hindus and Sikhs to return to Afghanistan, and they are promising that nothing will happen to them. But the Taliban themselves are now in a bitter fight with a faction of the ISIS called the ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. Therefore, they are not really winning this battle. Entire almost 2/3 of Afghanistan is now absolutely, like plunked in chaos because of the fight between this IS Khorasan and Taliban. Recently, the IS Khorasan are particularly targeting Sikh Gurdwaras, Hindu temples, whatever they're standing in Afghanistan, and the Shia Muslim mosques. Therefore, the Indian government actually must do something about this. They should grant more emergency visas. They should grant those pending visas which are pending for 10 and 15 of years in India. And the PM Modi, in fact, met with certain Afghan representatives of Afghan Hindus in 2022 February, and he promised them that emergency visas will be given. But my last word is this, that very sadly, those visas, hundreds of visas for people still stranded in Afghanistan, Hindus and Sikhs, they were not approved till a deadly attack took place by the ISIS Khorasan on a Gurdwara in Jalalabad. And after some people, some Sikhs were killed and the temple was vandalized. Then those visas were granted. So this is the situation now. I hope the situation improves and the Afghan Hindus finally can call some land their homeland. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And as I can see, one of the speakers whose names I had announced, but she was not there then, Dr. Medha Bhattacharya is now with us. So thank you so much, Moinat, for that amazing paper and for what you took us through and the plight. We will again come back to your paper for when we do the question answer round. So hold on to the thoughts, everyone, while we move to Medha now. So Medha, just one line introduction which you give of yourself and then launch into your paper, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Nandini, and I'm so sorry I couldn't make it earlier. I was having issues in getting into the meeting. Thank you for sending the link once again. Is there a way I could share my presentation? It's just a few slides, not much.
Yes.
So
the team will help you. So
okay, let me see. So I am Medha Bhattacharya. I'm an assistant professor with Bengal Institute of Technology. And can everyone see my screen?
yes, your screen is visible. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So as you can see that my paper is titled Analyzing Home and Homeland in Shani Muthu's Stories. And these are the two stories I'm going to talk about. So just a brief thought about what we understand by home and homeland, and then I'll gradually go into the stories. So home and homeland are words very dear to us, but these terms are more complex and complicated than they appear to be. What is home and where is homeland are problematic questions. It is even problematic to understand our bodies and where one belongs, not just geographically, but in terms of gender. Shani Muthu, an Indo-Trinidadian Canadian writer, in her fiction depicts this complicated complexity of who one is, what is the gender of a person, how should gender identity be determined, which country is one's home, or is it one more country, or is home made of bricks? Is homeland a hyphenated identity? My paper will attempt to answer some of the above questions using the method of discourse analysis. The stories I would explore are Out on Main Street and the upside downness of the world as it unfolds. It will be analyzed through the stories that the idea of home is always in a state of flux, whether it's local or global, domestic or transnational, biological or cerebral, microcosmic or macrocosmic. It will attempt to look into the nature of displacement, migration, and gender identity of the protagonist of the stories. So home will no longer be time and space constant as we usually think, but it is time and space continuum. So in the story Out on Main Street, we find that a protagonist is nameless. So the author keeps her nameless, and she complains about her new life in Canada and how the Canadians, the white Canadians, have expectation from them, as well as the Indians who have who are twice migrant or just migrant Indians. They prefer that the protagonist speak to them in Vancouver in a store. They expect the protagonist to speak in Hindi, and since she is not aware of the Hindi structure and she's not aware of the sentences, she's been ridiculed. In fact, she talks about a stage where she's a lesbian and her partner is also a lesbian. So whenever they go somewhere, the men look at them and they look at her because she's the male partner, and they look at her as if, you know, like something is wrong with her. So when they actually go to a sweetmeat shop, so this whole story, primarily the story is based on a place where they actually go to a sweetmeat shop in Canada, and they're ridiculed because the kind of names that the sweets have changed, and what the protagonist remembers the names of the sweets from Trinidad are no longer valid. So there are migrants who just treat them anyhow and ridicule them. So there is a kind of hierarchy working even amongst the Indian diaspora in Canada. So what the author is trying to say is like there is continuous phase of hegemony working on. So the other people sitting in the restaurant, I mean the sweet shop, the women, they're looking at the protagonist and her partner. So they finally think that these are Indians, but when the identity come out, like the fact that they're lesbians, the whole atmosphere becomes very cold, and they are marginalized, they're ridiculed. I'll just read a portion from the text. The narrator says, I quote, "We skin brown." This reflects that the unnamed narrator and her girlfriend are visible minority immigrants. On many earlier occasions, Jeanette has suggested to the narrator to, I quote, "grow her hair," end quote, quote again, "put on lipstick." So the idea is that her partner does not want the unnamed narrator to reveal to the rest of the world that they are lesbians, because that way they have issues which they face with the other diaspora, Indian diaspora, as well as people around them. So I would like to kind of mention what the primary themes were that the author is dealing with. And in this particular story, it's the twice migrant theme and the cultural identity. So I'll just go on to briefly mention how I would like culture interpreted in this particular paper. So the word culture, according to Raymond Williams, in the third definition of culture, espouses the word culture as, I quote, "the social definition of culture in which culture is a description of a particular way of life which expresses certain meanings and values not only in art and learning, but also in institutions and ordinary behavior," end quote. And Canada is known for its Multiculturalism Act of 1988, which aims to, I quote, "recognize and promote the understanding that multiculturalism reflects the cultural and racial diversity of Canadian society and acknowledges the freedom of all members of Canadian society to preserve, enhance, and share their cultural heritage," end quote. So the idea that these two people, being someone of color, being a visible minority immigrant. So by visible minority immigrant, I mean that the fact that the person is not from, I quote, "white Canada" is very immediate, it's very imminent because of their skin color. So the author tries to show that the whole concept of the multicultural mosaic is somewhere fractured, and something needs to be done to it, because whatever is home, so the idea of home for the protagonist, unnamed protagonist, again, the author is very careful not to give the protagonist any name, because she does not belong to any one particular country. So her home is somewhere in India. After her grandparents migrated, it's now in Trinidad. But again, in Trinidad, they have the Indian culture in bits and pieces. So she's kind of not very sure where she belongs in terms of home. And then again, there is the sexual identity, the gender identity, which she's also trying to come in terms with. Maybe she's in terms with it, but people around her do not accept the way she is. So the idea of home and homeland is very complex over here. And it is seen that there is always a change, because in 21st century, with so much of migration taking place, it's very difficult to pinpoint someone as just maybe Indian or just Trinidadian or just Canadian. So the author tries to show that there is a kind of flux going on all the time. In the upside downness of the world, as the title suggests, it's very funny, because the world is not supposed to be upside down, but here, according to the protagonist, it's upside down, because she is, again, like in the previous story, she's a migrant from Trinidad with having an origin in India. But then she meets two other lesbian couple, and they are more Indian than the protagonist herself. So the protagonist physically looks like an Indian, and people around her expect her to behave like an Indian, whatever that might be. And they expect her to have recipes of food. So she mentions that she had to actually go ahead, buy a cookbook, and learn Indian cuisines because people expected her to teach them how to cook Indian food. And she mentions that she has really never been to India, whereas her friends, the other lesbian couple, they have actually been to India. They met in India. And even one of the members of, they're also member of a temple, a satsang, and they go there to, so that they have a different idea of Indian spirituality, whereas this protagonist, who is actually is someone of an Indian descent, she has never been to that temple, and she's the only one in that temple. Primarily one of those people who are wearing Western clothes, whereas her Canadian friends, yeah, I'll just end quickly. So whereas her and Canadian friends are dressed up in sari and blouse, and they look very perfect. And then the protagonist mentions that what right do they have to look so perfect in that situation? Because she feels somewhere that she's lacking that identity of home, because seeing the white Canadian friends dressed up as Indians and she herself being dressed up in a t-shirt, she feels that somewhere there is a lack. So the idea, so what the paper I'm trying to posit is like, the idea of home and homeland is no longer, or cannot be said to be stable. It's in a continuous movement. And perhaps we could say the home is where the heart is. So it cannot be defined by any kind of passport. It cannot be defined by any kind of structure which is imposed on you, but rather it is home and homeland is what you actually feel about yourself and how you tend to interpret it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Medha. Again, a subject absolutely after my own heart, which talks of cultural amnesia and which talks of identity and identity formations. But we'll hold on to our thoughts as we pass to our next speaker. As I don't know if these people have come. Richa Sharma, are you there? I don't see her. Nimisha Yadav, are you there? In which case, I think we go to Trent Larson. I can see Trent Larson here. Trent, are you there? Trent Larson. Okay.
I think I see him here, but he's muted.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
here.
So Trent, over to you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, so let me get started really quickly. I would like to show some slides here. Get those there. Okay, so I'm Dr. Trent Larson. I'm from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, and my presentation today is about engaging diasporas in virtual reality skills training to develop tourism in sub-Saharan Africa. And so let me just get started. Of course, as we all know, the COVID has been very devastating to countries of the world, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa. And that has had a very devastating effect on tourism in that region, as well as other regions of the world. And so there's many strategies to think about to improve tourism, to sort of get us out of the economic decline that we find ourselves in because of COVID. And so that's kind of what we're talking about in this presentation. So one of the strategies that African countries can use is to employ their diasporans to help in this effort. And so I would like to just talk about that a little bit. So the African diaspora from sub-Saharan Africa, I just want to talk about that really quickly. The size is really kind of not clear. There are some estimates that say it's 160 million throughout the world. Some say 350 million. But what we do know is that the diaspora is found in several key regions, of course, North and South America, the Caribbean, Central America, and then, of course, Europe. There's a large population. So what we find with the diasporans, they are, many of them are highly educated. They're very tech savvy, and they, of course, in many cases have access to technological resources that could help in this whole idea of developing virtual tourism. Now, I just wanted to get that in your mind about the diaspora. Now I'd like to talk about some of the skills that would be required to develop virtual tourism, and some of those skills are digital modeling, computer-aided design, human-computer interactions. You can see there virtual reality design and virtual environmental design. There's a lot more I could talk about there, but in the interest of time, let me move on. So how was tourism impacted in sub-Saharan Africa? Just a couple of facts for that. The spending of international tourists was reduced by 64% during COVID. The domestic tourism fell by 41.6%. Some of the other things that happened in the sub-region, obviously there were flight cancellations, as there were everywhere. There were lockdowns of cities and countries, although it wasn't quite as severe in sub-Saharan Africa as it might have been in other places. And sadly, a lot of the popular tourist attractions were closed in the sub-region because of lockdowns and other reasons. So we see that as a problem. So I didn't really talk much about virtual tourism. Let me just mention that really quickly. Virtual tourism is an ICT-based tool or application that is based on the internet. But of course, there's many other applications of that. But it allows people to experience the destination's culture, its history, and any other points of tourism interest. Okay, so as you can see, that's what that is. And so there's many different ways of looking at that. And so again, we would be employing diasporans to help sub-Saharan African countries develop this virtual tourism, so that when we have another pandemic, if hopefully we won't have one as severe as COVID, but there could be other pandemics that come along. And so we need to be responsive to those situations and to rejuvenate tourism using virtual applications. So just another bit about virtual tourism. The market is expected to grow to 304.4 million in 2023. Virtual tourism applications, of course, they range from simply something on your desktop to the virtual reality visors that you've seen, and then they actually have entire rooms where these type of applications can be accessed. So there's quite a range of that. So what I propose, and I know my time's just about up, so let me just explain that really quickly. So what I would propose is that Sub-Saharan Africa create an initiative to reach out and tap into the skills of these diasporans. And so that would involve the African Union. That's a good organization to sort of bring everyone together, the ministries of tourism in each country, the African Virtual University, colleges and universities in Sub-Saharan Africa, tourism operators, and then of course diasporans to help with the training and implementation of that. So some of the barriers to this, of course, the inadequate technical infrastructure. There's a lot of things missing, but I think COVID sort of helped with that. The countries had to sort of ramp up and do stuff online because of COVID restrictions. And so I think that's a good springboard for that, but that is still going to be an impediment. Soaring inflation is another problem. Of course, that's brought on by the conflict in Ukraine. And so that's certainly going to be a concern for them. There's also the inadequate power grid. There are power outages, and then it just needs to be upgraded. Another challenge would be the fact that some of the diasporans are in different time zones. And so if you're going to have training, you have to figure out how you're going to do that. All right, so let me just move to the solutions to that. Solutions to all these problems, or at least some of these problems, would be collaboration of countries. So there are countries such as South Africa that have lots of resources where other countries don't. So they would have to sort of pool the resources to do this, and so that each country, of course, did benefit from it. Another possibility is diaspora bonds. Diasporans bring a lot of contributions to countries, and so diaspora bonds would be one opportunity. Also, I think I meant to take that one out. Corporate donations from diasporans from corporations and then from diasporans themselves could allow that initiative to be possible. And so, so in conclusion, I see the African diaspora as a great opportunity for countries in sub-Saharan Africa to utilize, to improve training and skills, and to really ultimately become like countries like India, where they've really tapped into their diaspora, and that's really created wonderful business opportunities. And I know my time's up, and so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trent. And that was an entirely different area, so to say. And yes, thanks to COVID, I think we really need to look at virtual tourism in a very big way. And so thank you, and we'll come back to it for discussion once all the presentations are over. So we move to our next speaker, and it is Edward Mbayonga. I don't know if I'm getting your name right. Is Edward here?
I think he's not there.
Yeah, I can't see him. Well, then our final speaker is Osman Muhammad Gabra. Are you there?
I don't know, some names are different. I think he's also not there. Maybe we can use this time for reflection and comments.
Okay, so we really finished before time because many of our speakers went missing. Am I missing any speaker by any chance? Anybody is here who happens to be a speaker and I have not mentioned that person? I will once again just call out the names which I don't see. Sorry for sounding very teacher-like with an attendance register, but I don't want to miss out on anybody. by any chance? So Himanshi we've had, Medha we've had, Richa Sharma is not here even now. Nimisha Yadav, we do not see her here. Mainak we've had, Trent we've heard. Edward is not there again, and Osman is not there either. Okay, so what then that leaves us with Dr. Sahu, how much time then? It leaves us with a reasonably good amount of time for discussion, is it not?
Yes, sir. We have up to 7. Just 1 minute.
Oh, so we have almost half an hour for discussion, which I think is phenomenal. So what I'll do is I'll briefly, I've been taking down notes, but I was also, I must admit, because of that 7 minute, which was weighing so heavily on my mind, I was also more focused on making you all finish, which now I think was not fair because we do have time. Anyway, so I think I'm going to talk about a few papers which were, supposedly this was a literature and diaspora discussion, but then it was enriched by so many other areas, which don't exactly pertain to literature, but like I said, literature is across boundaries. So we were very happy to have all kinds of papers. So our very first paper from Himanshi, and also I was immediately reminded of what Professor Khadria was saying yesterday about this intergenerational sort of attendance in this seminar. So again, we have young scholars, we have mid-career level people, and we have senior scholars who are with us. Professor Khadria is here, Professor Raj is here. So the discussion should, I'm sure, be very, very enriching with people such as these over here. So Himanshi, I thought what you were talking about, Erica Sanchez's novel was particularly very interesting, and what you were talking about generational differences, and you were talking about how the Mexican mother is perturbed by the way her daughter is behaving, how she has adopted American values, and that makes her a misfit as per the mother is concerned. And to my mind, I was constantly thinking, how is it any different from an Indian household that we see in any Indian household? You don't have to be a diasporic Indian household, really, because these seem to be universal situations where every parent seems to be concerned that there is something the matter with their child, and that they're moving away from cultural values, and they're sort of becoming foreign, or there's something the matter with them. So that is something that got me thinking. So which made me feel that maybe along with what you were already talking about, the novel that you chose, you could also look at other novels which are parallel and which are echoing similar thoughts, because I'm sure there's a whole galaxy of literature that you will find which is echoing similar thoughts. And then maybe look at the complexities, that it is not just the older generation saying that to the younger generation, because that is universal. I'm sure your mother is telling you how you didn't turn out how you were supposed to, and my mother tells me all the time. So I'm just thinking maybe we also look at a little more about the complexities that are there, not merely in terms of the generational shift, but also in terms of cultural adaptations and complexities within cultures and so on. And so I think maybe Himanshi, a little more, if you look at, I think that will really enrich your paper. But I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. Our next paper, again,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah,
Thank you for the inputs. Thank you so much.
As far as Professor Moinat's paper was concerned, I must say it's completely outside of my area of expertise. So I learned from your paper, I learned about the refugee problems and how India is sort of in this fairly complex situation that we seem to be in vis-a-vis our handling of the refugee situation. I was particularly intrigued by what you say about Germany's acceptance of Afghan refugees and the way they had accepted them with open arms. And then with the coming up of right-wing politics, how things became different there, and how I think globally that is what seems to be happening. So thank you for all of that. And I think eventually we would like to learn more from you as to how in this complex geopolitical situation are we, where, look at the situation in Ukraine now, and world over, so many refugees are people are forced to becoming refugees. So given a situation like that, what should the policies of governments be? How should we be tackling this major geopolitical situation? And it is becoming more and more prominent as we go along. So I think this is an area that needs to be talked about and discussed. And there are experts here who I'm sure will take this forward with you as we go along. Medha's paper, again, areas which are very close to heart. And I'm glad, Medha, that you problematize. I mean, you talked about how Shani Matu problematizes the questions of identities, which have become more and more complex, because you no longer are only Indian or only Trinidadian or only Canadian. There is so much of goings and comings, so much of generational shifts. Then what is a true Indian supposed to be, or a true Trinidadian supposed to be? And then if you are part of the LGBTQIA community, how, whether you're Canadian or Trinidadian or what you may be, how the discrimination seems to be universal. And among the Canadian aunties, which, one could write a book on them, I think, who came there first, and therefore who owned those spaces. So it is a very, very complex study. And I think we really need to focus on these areas, because, that whole concept of diaspora being, say, when we are talking Bharti Mukherjee, that you are that sadness, you've left your country, we've moved way beyond that. Now this is the 4th generation or the 5th generation. So who are you? Who is the 5th generation? So I hear stories like, oh, my mother has organized a Mehendi ceremony. All of you are interested. And then on an aside, exactly what is a Mehendi? Because one really doesn't know, but then there is a ceremony that is supposed to be happening. And the excitement is more about the colorfulness of it, having seen cinema coming out of there. So I think these are areas that we really need to look at, the whole concept of cultural amnesia, concept of what you very, very interestingly called an amnesiac identity. So what is your identity? What have you forgotten? What have you retained? Yeah, these are again very, very interesting areas that we need to ponder upon and look at. As far as Trent Larson's paper was concerned, again, I don't know if I'm qualified enough to talk about it, but I would completely agree that the COVID has thrown us these rather difficult challenges, as well as given us these scopes for doing things which we had never contemplated before. So virtual tourism is very definitely on the rise, particularly given the situation we are in now, where visas are not coming through, people are not able to travel. American visas are going to be given in every 2 years, apparently now, given the crazy situation that we are in. Given the travel restrictions, given the money that people have and are willing to spend, if the virtual tourism can be developed in a certain manner, I'm sure that would be a great thing. And it also the way you talk about, very, very educated diaspora who's there, who can be leveraged into this. So, and a very interesting area indeed. These are my very basic comments on the papers that have been read, and I thoroughly enjoyed each one of them. So now I request the audience here, if you have questions, we will take those first, and you can unmute yourself, ask the questions directly to the speaker, and let's take the discussion forward.
Dr. Sen, we have some very senior scholars here.
Yes.
Vinod Khadria, Professor Raj Bartoli.
That's what I
think we have Fanny Pickle-Moser and Dr. Sandhya Rao Mehta. So
I'm not
from literature itself, like Professor Pushpa Parekh and Dr. Sandhya Rao Mehta, they are from literature, I know.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to have made your acquaintance. So please, yes, Professor Raj, you're saying something? You need to unmute yourself, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute yourself. Professor Raj, please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Professor Kadria, you want to go, or shall I take a bite?
No, you go first, and then I will take my time.
Okay, right, okay. I think this session has been an exciting one because it has the whole issue of culture and how all these things impact on integration, the rights of people, identity, and so on. I'm not going to say that I have a question for X and Y. I might have, but I will give my comments or observations and then maybe throw in one question. Just allow me 5 minutes if that's okay. I think as I said, these have been interesting presentations, and the analysis has been quite good too. What comes to my mind is this whole issue of culture. Culture is one of the barriers, in my view, to integration in a host country, because that's how they see culture. They see culture, both language as well as the practices of customs and so on. Keeping those things become a sort of a barriers to integration, because when you go to a host country and you want to maintain your culture, even with Canada, multiculturalism and so on, there is still resistance on the part of the host community that they bring their culture and they bring their country to our country, and they are running two separate countries. Now, the question that comes to mind is, if we maintain our culture rigidly and then expect to be accepted and not be seen as the other. You see, these things are, so other is because your color is different, that's visible other. And then the second other is when you practice that otherness. You have your own group, you have your own communities. You go to school, you go to work, that's some form of integration. But staying, actually, I'm from the Caribbean. And people still maintain, this is amazing. People still maintain even though they have distorted certain practices. So what comes to my mind is that how important culture is one's identity. How do you practice your identity then outside of your area, outside of your country? How do we practice that? In many ways. Is it good? Is it bad? Should one be flexible? Would there be some distortion in practices? Like in Trinidad, the names are spelled differently. They are distorted largely because some people can't pronounce those, and they say, okay, maybe you can pronounce this one and not that one. However, it does not take away who you are, both in your heart as well as how you look and so on. This is an ongoing thing, and it's not going to change. People will keep their practice because they want to feel they belong, while they don't belong either way. They don't belong to, to the country in which they live in. They don't belong to the country they left behind years and years ago, or generations and generations ago. Now, this brings me to Trent's thing, Trent's paper. Trent's paper assumes that the old diaspora knows the countries they come from. But in the case of the African diaspora, African diaspora in North America and South America, they don't know where they came from because their culture was totally annihilated. So to say that I think they probably could benefit from virtual tourism, in my view. They will learn to know what is this region about. For example, Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire and so on. What are these countries? They don't know themselves. So even though they may use their technical knowledge to develop the tools for virtual tourism, but firstly, I think they will need to learn what sort of tools. They may have technical knowledge, but they may not have the cultural knowledge. So you can't express your virtual tool without knowing what that is supposed to show. So I think that would be a good idea. To tap their resources, but before you can tap their resources, I think the old diaspora needs to know what their background is. And in the case of the African diaspora, it's a little bit difficult. There was some kind of nostalgia in the 1960s to go back to Africa, but I think it hasn't happened and it's not going to happen. So I think that bit, perhaps Trent could pay a little attention, and I think the African Union they have designated African diaspora as the 6th region of Africa, because there are 5 regions. So the African diaspora is the 6th region, and they're trying to reach to them. But I don't think the reception is lukewarm, because they say, okay, you're coming to us to get our resources. You're not coming to us to accept us. Okay, so I have one more on Manak. Sorry, what was the name? I'm sorry for the pronunciation. I think that was very interesting, your presentation. But what my takeaway from that presentation is how the other, regardless of the origin of the other, is still seen as a security threat. So in my view, the reason, in other words, my understanding is perhaps one of the reasons that the Indian government was hesitant to accept them, Sikhs and Hindu, Afghan Sikhs and Hindus back into the country, even as refugees, is the kind of security baggage or threat that they have behind them. You understand? Even though they may not, but they are seen, the other, because they're coming from Afghanistan and they have maybe Taliban, they are a security threat to our country. So I think this issue of seeing the other always as a security threat, this narrative needs to be worked on. In other words, scholars have to do some work to show not everybody who is not from that place is a security threat, and it's not a reason to not accept and not to respect their human rights. Okay, so I think it's a issue. A lot of, from your presentation, a lot of, in my view, areas have come to the surface, including human rights, accepting people in that dire situation, even though you have not signed the UNHCR agreement, because when it came about, the idea was that, okay, our refugees were not accepted, covered. There was no such provision for covering the refugees from when India was broken into two, partitioned into two countries. There was no provisions for those refugees. So we are not, whatever the reason may be. But that does not mean that there's no need to relook. So I think that's another area where perhaps some work could be done to see how some countries could, those who have not joined the UNHCR Convention on the Rights of the Refugees, could consider rejoining, because the issues are unfolding. There are crises now. There are unimaginable crises, and soon we will have the environmental issue and so on. So, these things are fluid and they're unfolding, and perhaps they need to be relooked. I think I have, of course, I enjoyed Meda's presentation as well, and which is again the cut. But thanks so much. I have probably overindulged. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor. We have a question here before we go to Professor Khadri. I think we'll take this question because Fanny is unable to speak, she says. So we have it on the chat. And it says, thank you for the interesting presentations. I'm sorry I cannot speak as I'm traveling. And there's a question for Professor Larson. Do you have any concrete examples of virtual heritage tourism initiatives implemented in sub-Saharan Africa? And she's working on the EU Global Diaspora Facility. So if Trent, you could take this question and you could answer it.
Well, during the diaspora, there were a lot of countries that had to do some things. One of the things that was done was they're actually still doing it, is virtual safaris. So in, I think it's Botswana, I think is one of the countries, they have that available. And you can actually, from your computer, you can go on a virtual safari. You can have a tour guide that will take you through that. And so you can actually sign up for that and pay for that. And so that's something I think that they're continuing to do. Of course, there are some other things. Let me just mention a couple other things that have just maybe started a little bit. One of the things is like drone technology. They have the drone, they can put the cameras, you can take pictures of wildlife, other attractions. And if you think about it, there's people who can't get to some places. And so that would be an important opportunity for them to be able to access areas that they couldn't see. And even, people who are able to get to, many places, there might be some places that are impossible to get, but from the view of a drone, you could show that, areas that people would be interested in seeing, but no one can get there because of, maybe it's too high or too obscure. So I don't know. There's just a lot of possibilities that I think could be developed.
Okay, thank you so much, Trent. I think Professor Khadria wanted to say something, sir.
Yes, Nandini, very briefly, thank you. It's nice to see you after some time due to perhaps COVID, and perhaps you were also busy writing yourself and reading out to other people. And I should mention that you have written yourself a lot, although you are not you are a non-diaspora author. We do have diaspora literature, but that's something which also needs to be celebrated. And I think your last one that I keep hearing about was The Second Wife and Other Stories. So I hope that we should have in this kind of conference a particular session where authors are invited to read their own work. That kind of a literary festivals that we have, and perhaps in the next round I'm going to suggest this to the organizers for having something like this. Having said that, I also enjoyed your comments as a chair, and I think it is very interesting session, as my colleague Raj has also mentioned. Particularly the two presentations on the literature, and I assume that the background of the authors of those two are also important to be shared by the paper presenters in terms of whether they are diaspora authors or they are non-diaspora authors or from a third country who are observers of the Indian diaspora. I think, and what you mentioned, Nandini, in terms of what the stories are more or less universal, generic in terms of the generation gap, and that's where you find that there is a conflict between preference and judgment. That's what I would say, that the preference of the current generation or the generation who have that kind of openness or modernity as opposed to conservativity, what is it called that in terms of particularly with reference to sexuality and so on. That's where I think that the conflict is not only between generations, but it is also with a particular generation. Within the generation, it is a conflict between one's own preferences and judgments. That is very, very important, that I may like something, I may be obsessed with something, or I may have an addiction to something, but if you ask me, then I would say, don't do it, don't follow me. That kind of a situation is very important to comment upon. And that will also come from the background of the authors of these literary pieces. That's very, very important. So far as the concept of home and homeland is concerned, I think it's very fluid kind of it is becoming fluid over time with the diaspora, because we are into transnational space now. People don't have one home, they have many homes, and with growing tendency for dual citizenship, multiple citizenship, and so on, you find that it is not only de facto, but as well as it is also de jure, that you may have more than own homes, and then it's a question of where your loyalty lies. Can we rank the loyalty in terms of this is my first loyalty and this is my second loyalty, and this is where my heart wants to go first, and then the second, that kind of a situation where your children are and where your spouses are. There are situations where partners are living in two different spaces, geographical spaces and political spaces. So I think those need to be taken into account. At the same time, I would like to say that diaspora lives in the past, nostalgia that Raj had mentioned, and that's where I find that many a time you find that the original home country has moved on, goes into progressive situation, whereas the diaspora remains stuck with that memory and with those values which are no longer true. So that I think is something which is very interesting coming out as a context here that we need to perhaps address. And of course, I think in both these cases, the literary pieces, these are important issues that we need to address. So far as Moinak's point is concerned, I think it's very important information that he has shared, and I was particularly struck by his sharing the fact that Germany has sent the refugees back to Afghanistan. I mean, the question of India coming into the picture is not relevant because, what Raj was saying in terms of suspicion of terrorism and these things, but they are far-fetched. They are not, non sequitur in the sense. But if he is referring, Mainak, he said that he deals with international relations and international law, then the question is whether Germany is, stepping over the right of non-refoulement. Non-refoulement is something by which we mean that if people are given asylum, then the country does not have a right to take it back. It cannot send them back the space where persecution may take place again. So how did Germany get over that kind of a situation where it was perhaps going to be alleged that it is violating the non-refoulement clause of international law? That I think is something that we may throw some light on. Trends, African diaspora, and it's fascinating, and particularly about the role of the drones reaching in non-accessible areas and bringing them to. I think it is a kind of overlapping space where you go into adventure films, or where you go into the territory, into the domain of filmmaking, and so on. So that's where. But he mentioned about the role of the diaspora in terms of donations. That's where I think that it is actually addressing the area of diaspora philanthropy. Diaspora philanthropy we had seen during the COVID times in terms of its relevance to the subject of this particular conference, where COVID is one of the terms we have used in the title of the conference. I think COVID has, shown us that diaspora philanthropy work can go very far. Particularly the Sikhs that were mentioned here, the Sikh diaspora was remarkable in the case of supply of food and medicines and access to healthcare, access to treatment in the gurudwaras was something, even to the extent that NDTV, joined the gurudwaras in terms of managing these funds and taking them to the right place, because we have to be careful that there may be leakages. The donations can leak out because after all it's a human value, and that's where you find that there are other kind of elements that come into play. So I think it was a fascinating session in that sense, and I certainly would be looking forward to listening to Pushpa and other authors who are here, and of course, not the least from Nandini yourself.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks so much for your wonderful comments. And since you raised this question, and since I think I was so obsessed with time, so I feel our speakers maybe should be given a little more time, both Medha and Himangshi. Maybe you talk a little about the authors that you have mentioned, and then the connect. You would have done that if you had the time. And Moinak, I think maybe you talk us through what Professor Khadria was just talking about. And I mean, I treat it as a question for you or as an observation, which you could take. So one by one, I think starting from Himangshi, we'll go with that order. Himangshi, Moinak, and then Medha. If you would take these comments and talk a little,
Okay, sure, ma'am. So, ma'am, the author of the novel I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, she's Erika Sanchez, and she's herself a Mexican-American woman.
Mhm.
And this is obviously a fictional work. I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. It is a fiction, but certainly it derives from the author's own life. It certainly has some aspects of her own life. There are certain reflections of Erika Sanchez, own growing up in a traditional conservative Mexican household. And there are reflections in that. And now recently she has come up with a memoir, Crying in the Bathroom, it is titled. And I'm sure there are more reflections regarding to her own life in that memoir. But then I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, it is a fiction, but then it derives from the author's own life up to certain extent. And ma'am, I would like to say I would like to add something else also. Like you have pointed out the universality of generational difference and cultural control and everything. But Mexican society, the condition of young Mexican women is obviously there is that universality, but it is particularized in a manner also, because Mexican society, it is basically guided by a notion, it is called Marianismo. So we all have heard about machismo, how it is a male ideal. Then Marianismo is the cultural counterpart of machismo, and it is basically a code of conduct for women. And it derives from, from Virgin Mary, the ideals which relate to Virgin Mary, that a woman has to be pure and she has to be self-sacrificing and everything. So there is that universal generational difference and intergenerational discord, which is apparent across migrant or diasporic societies. But then I believe for Mexicans, it is different, or it is particularized in that sense that it derives from that conception of Marianismo, and it has a religious sort of bearing also, because it derives from the notion of Virgin Mary and how women should adhere to those ideas of Virgin Mary, of purity and self-sacrifice, and that sexuality as something very negative, and which only has you can say it has only it should be used as far as it is related to the propagation and the family life. So active female sexuality is also negated, and then other ideals are also imposed, which actually derive from that ideal of Virgin Mary, which have been more or less constructed again, around Catholicism and all. So this is how their situation, Mexican women's situation, is particularized if we take it in a more general sense also. So I could not talk about all those things in detail because of time
which is why I wanted you all to talk a little further.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Himangshi. But again, what you told me is reminding me so much of India and Indian women.
Yes, they are related in a sense, but then the Mexicans, they derive it from Catholicism and from that figure of Virgin Mary, the ideal of
all organized religion
Yes.
treats women in a certain way.
Yes.
It's not peculiar to any.
It is again similar, but then yes.
Yeah. But yes, the good part is then that allows you to have a larger canvas to look at, You can look at more text, you can look at that entire canvas, and you can see the commonalities and the dissimilarities.
Among religions and cultures, yes.
Thanks so much, Himangshi. Medha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini. And thanks to the other senior scholars for their wonderful comments. I really appreciate it. And it's really amazing to listen to your experiences and your ideas about this topic. So my paper was on the fiction of Shani Mutu. And Shani Mutu is a writer, a visual artist, and also a video maker. She was born in Dublin. She's, of course, of Indian origin. She was born in Dublin to Trinidadian parents who are also of Indian origin. And at the age of 19, she relocated to Vancouver, and now she lives in Toronto. So from a very young age, she used to write poems which talked about sexuality, like same gender or same sex sexuality. And, her people around her were not too encouraging about it. And then she later disclosed that she was sexually assaulted by someone, by a senior member of the Indian, someone known to her, so her grandfather's friend, I think. And when she tried to voice this, she was kind of, like with the conservative Indian society, the Indian descent society, she was asked to shut up. So the way that this came up was through her visual artist trying to show to the world how things were. So the whole medium became very visual. And then she finally started writing fiction. And Out on Main Street was, and Other Stories was her first collection of stories. And that was in 1993. And then she had her first novel, Sirius Blooms at Night. So even the titles are very unique. I mean, they make you think. And sexuality and the diaspora experience is something which is very prominent in her novels in different ways. And they are like abundant. And I have been working on Shani Mutu for a long time, since my master's specialization was on Canadian literature. So I have been doing my own work on that for a long time. And I'm basically a published author. My book came out in 2020, and it was not on diaspora, but it was on a very rare piece of literature called the Rabindranath Tagore Shantiniketan Essays, Religion, Spirituality, and Philosophy. It came out by Routledge. It's used by some universities in the US too. And it was work on different levels. So there was philosophy, there was religion, there was translation studies, all in one. And I have been working on Mutu for a long time. And the more I analyze her work, I find that it's really amazing. Maybe because she's a visual artist and a video maker, she has this idea of making you just don't read her texts, you actually visualize what she's trying to show. So she has that remarkable quality of putting you in that place, and it's like you're watching a movie. I don't know whether it's very unique to me or I see it that way because I read her as a student and I thought this was amazing. And her language, especially in Out on Main Street, I didn't get much time, but her language, she uses a kind of pidgin English. I grew up in Africa, I grew up in Nigeria, and pidgin English is something I'm very much used to. People in local places, they would use pidgin English. And so that gives an essence of the land itself. So the protagonist that she's trying to portray, she is someone of Indian descent. She is speaking in pidgin English. She's a diaspora in Canada, twice migrant in Canada. And she is speaking in pidgin, which is more, it's coming from the African side. Not very much, people in India don't speak pidgin English. So it's like the kind of combination that she has going in that protagonist, I think it's amazing. And Professor Raj was talking about the diaspora experience and how you make it authentic. And I'm just back from a Fulbright tenure in the US. And I think like growing up as a child, as a diaspora in Nigeria, I had that experience for 11 years. And then the last 1 year too, it was a different kind of experience. Like you have Diwali, you have festivals, you have so many things going in 1 year. And then how do you really come to terms with it? How do you accommodate everything according to your own terms? So, and then not pretend and not project yourself as the other, like she has very nicely pointed out. So I think the idea is to assimilate and also to keep that unique identity within oneself. So I think it's a kind of a very fine balance which one has to maintain. Like, how much am I going to project my Indianness and how much I'm going to be part of that melting pot? Or I think the first thing was like getting to understand the culture very quickly, and then trying to accommodate yourself or assimilate yourself in the similar manner, because I feel that the host culture also gives you a lot of scope to express yourself, and they're very appreciative in a way. So I think that makes it easier, because right now we are in a transnational space, so everybody understands how complex this navigating from one space to the other, not just a physical space, but also a mental space, a cultural space. So I think it's very important that one gets to ask these questions about the diaspora existence. And Professor Kataria was talking about how the, the host, how the mother culture, or, like the culture in India, it moves, and people of the diaspora origin, they keep something, like they have a box, a bundle of goodies they take from, their home country to a different country, and they kind of keep the culture. Because I remember my parents talking about certain things, because my father is an engineer, so we moved in the early 80s. And so the kind of cultural atmosphere I got in the Indian community, or even at home, was very different. And when I returned to India in mid-90s, I found that there is a lot of shift. So I grew up in my father's generation of that culture, Indian culture, and I came back. It wasn't too different, but again, like the mid-90s was a time where India was really shifting very fast. Values were changing, industrialization was happening, so software industry was coming into the system, so things were getting changed very fast. And I was like, oh, but you didn't tell me something like this. But this is something I'm facing with my friends. They have this kind of mindset. So adaptation was one of those things I had to do very fast, because I felt that, this is not the India my parents were talking about. This is the India where I grew up, in the concept of India where my parents grew up. Or by the time they left India, that was the concept of India. But when I returned, India was like at the verge of a very rapid transformation. So I had no time to like think about that nostalgia that my parents were thinking about. So I had to move very fast and, get adapted. Now, post-COVID, we were like I'm sorry. I'm taking up the time, sorry. But I really appreciate the comments and the time you've given for me to explain it further. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Medha. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to say anything? There are people who have not spoken. I'm told there are scholars here, literature scholars. Yes, Professor Pushpa.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. This was an excellent panel, and I missed all those people who were not present. I wanted to hear also their presentations, but I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I teach in a historically Black college, a women's college. And so I have some observations that I want to make. I'm a literature scholar and teacher. And one of those comes from what I would say is some theoretical underpinnings, but also some pedagogies that I use. I ask my students to think more deeply about knowledge that they bring to the class, to the readings, and how they then are moved to wonder what they know and what they don't know about the texts that they're reading, especially the cultures, because I teach a lot of multicultural texts. And then move to actually document what they have learned from the readings. And I think there are what they call the KWL charts that they use just to document what they're doing and be involved in these. One of the things that I found, and this may be because I have an interest in food, but cultural artifacts are constructs. And of course, they're constantly in flux. And as generations move, they carry with them, especially transnational diasporic generations. And I'm thinking we always move with what we were familiar with in the spaces that we occupied and take it to other places that we then begin to embrace as our homes. So I think it is very, very crucial for us to understand that these concepts are constantly being invoked, but also that they are in flux. And so next generation will redefine what it means to them. And that is as valid as it was for maybe the parents' generation. I'm teaching the Joy Luck Club, and it's excellent means by which we can explore many of the themes that were brought up here, but also the complexities of thinking about culture. And there is a term that is used by theorists called cultural porn. Sometimes people engage in it because that is one means by which you think in a very commercialized space that we all occupy now, as Arundhati Roy reminds us all the time. We are trying to understand what we can about culture from whatever means we have available. And I think bringing in the paper about tourism was very interesting to me, because I have both a trepidation about, consuming culture from outside of that, where it is being constantly revised and relooked and also resisted. So it's what do we call culture, and how does tourism industry play a role in kind of fixing it, by saying this is the culture. And I tell my students, even, a culture that often is defined as Chinese or Indian or any of those, Mexican or whatever, it's one strand of the cultural complexity that exists. And unless you know the history and how a culture has been redefined during certain historical contexts, political and economic and social changes that were going on, it's impossible, because pinning it down to one thing, you may think patriarchy is the dominant culture in certain parts of the world, but there is always the resistant forces that you're not taking into account. So to me, that is the biggest detriment to thinking culture is fixed. And I want to always, and I validate, I think, a literary lens that takes into account the multiple perspectives of different, authors and readers as well. And the more complex and different we are, the more we bring to this understanding. So thank you very much. This was an excellent panel in that sense.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think the one person I missed out calling was Moinat. Would you like to have the last word? Take us a little through your, research. And,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. First, let me thank the chair, Honorable Chair, for presenting an excellent and concise description of all our papers before the Q&A session began. And now I move to Professor Raj's observations, excellent observations. And I was particularly moved by something she said. She said that the refugees, they don't belong either way. They don't belong anywhere. And that cannot be more true in case of the Afghan Hindu and Sikh refugees who are living in Germany. Actually, the Afghan Hindu community in particular was a very close-knit community, since they were always under attack, always under some kind of threat. So in order to continue their existence. They were very tightly knit. They always married within their own community, and anyone who married outside was actually almost disowned by the entire family and the entire community. And the elders, they always had the last say in what the community is actually going to do. In a way, these people were, their culture was more in line with the local Pashtun culture of the Afghans who are living there than with the culture of, let's say, of the Hindu community who are living maybe in North India, the plain lands of North India. They spoke Pashto. Pashto was their first language. They still now they speak Pashto as their first language and not any Indian language. Therefore, when these people, when they're moving to Germany, and they're trying to mingle with the let's say the South Asian diaspora there who are living there, they are not really being able to integrate. They're not being really seen as Indians or certainly not as Pakistanis. And when they are living there, the people of the Afghan Hindu diaspora, when they're living in Germany, their younger generation is now they are becoming more in tune with the culture that is prevalent in Germany, the Western culture. And that is something which is deeply disturbing and deeply painful for the elders, people who have, let's say, migrated from Afghanistan in the 70s and in the 80s and who still long to go back to Germany. Long to go back to Afghanistan, to their homeland. The new generation, not so much. They have found a life in Germany, and that is something which is in the minds of the elders detrimental to the very existence of the community of Hindu Afghanis. Then the disaster strikes in 2015, and then what happens? These young people who thought that they could be easily assimilated into the German culture and were trying so hard, even facing resistance from their own family and own community, to be jailed inside the German culture. Now they find that the German culture does not really accept them. Now they're being thrown out of Germany. So really, they don't belong anywhere. Either the elders or the younger generation, they don't belong anywhere. And now I come to Professor Khadria's excellent observation and his question regarding the non-refoulement laws and how Germany is actually dealing with that law. Now, what Germany is doing actually since 2015 and 2016, Germany is saying that we are under this larger umbrella of refugee laws that the EU is following, the European Union is following. And that actually is becoming a shield for the German political class, for the German government, when they're dealing with the refugees. Now, they are saying that the EU has taken a stand where the non-refoulement law can be bypassed if the EU and the German state believes that the refugees are not being sent back to a land where they will be persecuted for their religion, where they will be subject to inhuman or cruel tortures. Now, Germany is saying and EU is saying that since, and I'm talking about the Hamid Karzai administration era, not talking about the Taliban era, please understand. So they were saying that since the Karzai government was in its phase, let's say a democratic government, and that the right of minorities would be defended there. Therefore, there is no harm in sending the Afghan Hindus and Sikhs back to Afghanistan. If that also helps the cause of the Afghan state with the aids and all those loans that I was talking about earlier. And they are also saying, the European Union is saying, that certain safe zones can be built inside Afghanistan or other, let's say, Middle Eastern states where the refugee problem is there. And inside these safe zones, these refugees can be sent back, and that will not subvert the refoulement law of UNHCR. So that is how they're trying to deal with it. And as I've already said, that since 2021, these arguments are not holding water anymore. Therefore, for some time now at least, the policy of sending the refugees back have been stopped. We'll have to see what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moina. So I think we've overshot our time by 15 minutes in spite of people not being present. But I think the good fun was that we really could discuss and indulge each other and learn from each other. If there are no more pressing questions, shall we close the session because the next session needs to begin? Is there anyone with any pressing question?
I will just make one small observation. This session, excellent session, it makes me think and go back to William Goy's remark yesterday when he said that, we have to leverage our wisdom to turn it into practice. And that I think is very much relevant with those dealing with literature, because there are limits. As you said, that literature is actually all social sciences put together, and that is very, very important message for our presenters, that they have to step out of that cocoon of their being authors and become activists, make the change that you see in your literature. That, I think, is what William meant when he said that. That's all.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think, as I'm listening to all of you, I feel that maybe a third book on literature and diaspora should be in the offing. So let us all start writing and take our thoughts further on the subject. It's been an honor chairing this wonderful session. And once again, let me congratulate each one of you, each one of the speakers who has spoken. And I've learned so much from you. For all the eminent professors who are here, thank you so much. I've learned so much from you. It's been my privilege. Thank you all so much.
And I would like to thank you, Professor Nandini, for your excellent moderation and chairing of this session. We really all enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And to, of course, paper presenters, excellent job. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Mahalingam, are you there?
There, sir, I'm there.
Okay. Just test your video.
What?
Video, whether it is working or not.
Now it's working. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Because I was trying very hard. Now I just finally logged in. Yes.
Okay, fine.
So what time we are starting?
You can start now without delay.
Acha, you said that 7:30. So I
No problem. If we start early, we can complete early.
Okay, I'm just staying in the room. Am I audible, sir? Is it clear?
Yes, it's audible. I want to see your video.
Acha, okay. I will just open my video. Yes. I'm opening my video. You can see me now.
No.
Yes, hello.
Just okay.
Okay, am I looking fine?
Just light is a little dark. Front light is not there.
Because no, my light is not good. That's the power.
Okay, you have the list of presenters?
Yes, I have everything.
Okay, so you can start now, even without delay, because 7:20, 10 minutes before.
Achha, let me check with my rapporteur. She's ready. What's her name? Dingra. Miss Dingra is here.
Just check.
Because she asked.
No, she was yesterday, so I can introduce you.
Okay, no problem. Not for introduction, but I just want to know who's my rapporteur. I mean, how many participants are there in my session? So I want to check that before I start.
I can see 2, but I don't know how many will join now.
Okay. Because according to schedule, no, Simran Dingra is my rapporteur. Yeah.
Simran is not there.
Okay. Anyway, somebody will be, writing the report. So anyway, no issue. So, okay. Good evening, everyone. We are just planning to start the session a little early because we have to, start the closing session followed by this panel discussion. I mean, this panel session, sorry. We have 7 papers in this session. So I hope, let me check with the attendance. So let me check who's here. Pefi, have you joined? Pefi.
She's not there. Anytime she joined.
Okay. Miss Richa.
Richa also not here.
Okay. And Tushar. Tushar is there. Tushar. It's a combined paper. It's a, it's a joint paper. Tushar, Manisha, who's there? Wasim. And what about Rani Mehta?
Yes, I'm there. Good evening. Good evening.
So you are what? You are, I mean, what's your name? Good name?
I'm Professor Rani Mehta.
Acha, Rani Mehta is here. Okay, Professor Rani Mehta is here. Welcome. And Saima Parveen, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Saima is there. Miss Saima. Okay. Next, Fatma Khatun. Fatma, yeah, Fatma Khatun. Acha, you are there.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Muhammad Imran Khan. Imran Khan, are you there?
No, Imran is not.
Acha. Okay. Out of 7, I think there are 5 people who are, I mean, 4. I mean, like out of 7, there are 4 people here. I think let's start.
Also.
Yeah, this session is for an hour, actually. That's what I was told, you know. So you have to, I think now we have only 4 participants who are present now. I think I can give you 10 minutes instead of 7 minutes. Is that fine, Dr. Sahu?
Yes, yes. Shall I formally introduce you?
Yeah, yeah, Bilkul, you are most welcome. Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Can you see me now?
Yes, sir, I can see you.
Okay. So, Dr. Mahalingam has been working on migration and diaspora for almost 2 decades. He did his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and after that he joined SGD University, and he did other journalism work and other things also. His PhD work is mainly on Indian diaspora in Malaysia, and after that he has been publishing paper regularly, and he was earlier the president of JRFDT, and he is still working with us. And I don't have much things to say now because time is very less. So over to you, Dr. Mahalingam.
Yes, Dr. Sahu, thank you so much for this nice introduction. Dear participants, our session is called Climate Change and Migration. And we have 7 papers, but there are 4 participants who are present now. So let me start with, Rani Mehta, who's presenting on climate change, health risk, and vulnerability of migrants. It's over to Rani, and open your video and also your PowerPoint, whatever you have, and you are given 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And this is an honor actually to be presenting paper with the distinguished dignitaries and eminent scholars present in the session. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to have fruitful interaction through my views with all the eminent scholars or intellectuals from all over the world. So thank you so much. And as you know, my paper is on climate change, health risks, and vulnerability of migrants. It's based on secondary sources of data. And since I'm facing some technical issues, there's some glitches. So I'm going to speak out my paper. So I'm not using the PPT. So I hope it's okay.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'll be talking about the environment, climate change.
Professor Rani, I said, can you introduce yourself just a little bit, like from where you are and what you are working?
Professor Rani Mehta I've been former chairperson of Department of Sociology, Punjab University, Chandigarh. And right now I'm the administrative head of the department.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure, actually. Thank you so much. So as we all know, environment, whether physical or social and cultural, if not protected adequately, may cause health hazards to the inhabiting populations. We are already experiencing a wider and intense phenomena of air pollution, water pollution, soil degradation, depletion of ozone layer, causing health risks of various kinds. The environmental challenges outlined above as a consequence of population growth and rapid increase of energy use are believed to be also causing global warming, having mostly negative physical, environmental, and socioeconomic consequences. Further, due to global warming, climate change is likely to occur that may result in changes of precipitation patterns, ocean circulations, and marine systems, water availability shortage, and a rise in the sea level. These changes can influence agriculture and nature ecosystems like wetlands and fisheries. Climate change can thus have effect on future livability and survival. Now, when we talk about climate change, it can be viewed in two ways. One is as an environmental problem with technical or behavioral solutions, such as managing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting environmentally friendly lifestyles. However, we can also view it in another way. When climate change is viewed as a social problem, these solutions relate to economic, political, cultural, and institutional changes, including removing poverty, inequality, food insecurity, the biodiversity loss, and health crisis. Thus, climate change also relates to health and well-being, including immediate health hazards of weather-related illness and fatalities, such as heat stroke or heat exhaustion, direct physical threats, such as vector and waterborne diseases, along with problem of mental well-being. And these can be faced more among the migrant populations, the vulnerable populations, because they are displaced and they have issues of resettlement. Now, what are the direct consequences of climate change on the health of these migrant populations? The warmer temperatures and more rainfall as a result of climate change are expected to increase the extent of vector-borne diseases by providing a suitable habitat for ticks and mosquitoes that carry these diseases. Climate change also enhances risks of flood-related contamination of drinking water, leading to higher prevalence of waterborne diseases such as cholera, diarrhea, also viral, bacterial, and parasitic illnesses, especially among the vulnerable populations. In temperate and colder regions within North America and Northern Europe, as a result of climate change, the distribution of disease-carrying ticks is shifting north and to higher elevations. These shifts have led to an enhancement in human contact with ticks by increasing rate of Lyme disease and tick-borne encephalitis in many locations. For example, in the United States, the cases of vector-borne diseases from ticks and mosquitoes reportedly more than doubled between 2004 and 2016. So that's an alarming number. Also, along with this, we have some indirect consequences or indirect effects of climate change. As climate change will influence the habitat and microclimates of many plants which are used for traditional and conventional medicines. For example, India's flora, which it represents about 7% of the world's flora. They are a big source of medicinal plants, which are used in preparing the Ayurvedic, the Unani, the folk medicines, taken up by a large number of villagers and tribals in the remote parts of the country, and these will be adversely affected by climate change. So because these are going to vanish or diminish due to climate change, and therefore people living in very remote areas, the tribals, etc., they will be deprived of these medicines and medicinal plants, and this may affect their health in a negative way. Also, another indirect effect of climate change is on mental health. Extreme climate crisis can have a significant impact on mental health through physical danger due to a storm, flood, or wildfire. Mental health problems may also be experienced in the form of sadness or grief associated with climate shock or stress, climate-related disruptions, loss of loved species, locations, or experiences. These kind of psychological aspects of climate change can have socioeconomic and physical consequences, such as reduced capacity to concentrate and participate in routine work, missing school or going to workplace, increased consumption of pain-reducing medicines, etc. In extreme cases, climate change can also result in increased rates of domestic violence or attempted suicide. Thus, climate change-related traumas can impede healthy physical, social, mental, and emotional development. For some persons, post-traumatic stress disorders can continue long after extreme events and disasters. For example, in the case of Hurricane Katrina, which struck the Gulf Coast of Louisiana in the United States in 2005, recovery time for post-traumatic stress disorders was influenced by lack of access to basic necessities, forced relocation, that is forced migration, and difficulty obtaining housing and employment. Besides these direct and indirect consequences, we also have some induced consequences of climate change, which focus on the changes in the way social institutions cope with ecological stress, including changes in the institutions themselves as a consequence of shifts in demographic regimes. For example, with the slowdown of population growth, there is likelihood of a reduction in greenhouse gases in the long run. Therefore, climate change strengthens the case for voluntary family planning programs. Besides, it also strengthens the case for indirect population policies, especially investments in female education, as they are not only to increase individual welfare, but may also result in lowering the fertility. So some of the induced changes can have positive impact on the population. To conclude, I would say that thus climate change is a global challenge which requires reflecting on various political and economic power constellations, cultural norms and expectations about prosperity, well-being, good quality of life, and security, especially among the migrants. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Rani. And it was very comprehensive presentation, and you provided a macro perspective of how climate change impacts on health. So we will discuss about your paper at the end of the session. There is a question answer session also. We have a very large number of incoming participants in the chat room, so they'll be asking questions as well, so be prepared. And I think you just took 7 minutes to complete your paper. Thank you very much, and really indeed a good it's a good nice to meeting you and also listening to you. Just stay on and just be ready to take up the question and also get the comments from the we have scholars like Binod Kadria also in the session. Sir, hello sir, how are you? So I think he's there. So lots of people are there. So
yeah, I'm good, Mahalingam. Thank you for your welcome. And it was fascinating listening to Professor Mehta.
Yes, thank you, sir. And we look forward to your question to her.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sir is always there. He's our current president of Global Research Forum and Diaspora. He's mentoring us. He's an inspiring scholar and also sincere, serious scholar. Nice to have you, sir, here. And now I just over to, let me go to next presenter. I think Richa is back. So Richa, are you ready to present?
Yes, sir. Yes, I can present, sir.
Yeah, Richa's paper is Climate-Induced Mobility, an evidence-based study in Bihar, India. So you are, you have a 10 minutes, so you can go ahead. And after your presentation, there'll be at the end of the session, there'll be a question answer session and also comments from the audience as well as from me. Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, your time starts now. Now it's 7:36. So you have 10 minutes at your hand.
Okay. Sure.
Are you able to do that? Screen sharing?
No, not yet.
Okay, do it. Be comfortable. Yeah. I think Richa, yeah, now it's
Is it visible?
yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Yes,
Okay, sir.
it's visible. Just please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure, sir. Good evening, everybody. I am Richa. I'm a research scholar at Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, India, and I'm working in the area of climate change and migration for my PhD dissertation. And this is one of the work that we are doing in this research. So the title for today's presentation is Climate Change Induced Migration and Evidence-Based Study in the Selected Districts of North Bihar. This is a presentation outline for today's talk. So since I don't have much time, so I'll just explain what is the core issue of this paper. This study aims to see the linkages between climate change, floods, and migration. We are using basically evidences from North Bihar. For this, we conducted the primary survey in that selected region, which we are talking about. I'll not go into these details, which I have mentioned. I have written in my paper because we don't have that much time for today's talk. Yeah, this is a main keyword of the paper that is climate change induced migration. So who will be considered as a climate change migrant or induced migrant? So when people are forced to leave their place of origin because of long-term adverse impacts or maybe sudden impacts in their climatic systems or fact, then they are considered as climate change induced migrants. There are different terminology and there is a very big confusion that who truly may be called as climate migrants. There's thin lines between refugees, migrants, and other terms which are used for people moving. So we are basically using this particular definition for this work. This is the background and the economy of Bihar as a comparison to India. So you all can see from this figure 1 that Bihar is lagging behind on almost all the indicators of development as well as growth as compared to national average. So obviously Bihar is already vulnerable, is economically, socially vulnerable. And the second figure that you can see is that there is a long history of floods in Bihar. But through these different graphs, you can just visualize that there are big sharp increases or peaks in current discourse. So the severity and intensity of these disasters, especially the floods in case of Bihar, have increased over the last 2 decades. So already a vulnerable region, which was economically, socially vulnerable and is vulnerable, is obviously the vulnerability will be triggered because of the disasters or maybe we can say climate induced any extreme impacts on this region. So this may contribute, this particular scenario makes Bihar as a perfect case for this kind of study. And that's why we chose this area. These are the theoretical review in this context. We're taking up some means some arguments of new economics of labor migration. We're not purely using new economics of labor migration or any other theoretical model that have discussed migration in the development discourse, because the topic that we are addressing here is truly a multidisciplinary work, and none of the theory can actually have substantiated their arguments and acknowledge this particular factor in their course of analysis. So obviously we are also taking a small element of these theories in our work. The empirical review says that there is a very there is very limited work that has been done on the measurement of migration, which dissertation have focused. In this particular work, we are trying to find the evidences because earlier literature have mentioned that it is more evident in agriculture dependent economy. So we are also looking at that kind of scenario, whether it is true or not. So we're looking at that. This figure shows that how different push and pull factors of migration may trigger, push and pull factors will trigger migration. And in this context, we are using climate change and natural disaster also as a push factor, and how it will affect this has been explained using this particular figure in the paper. So the main research question that is that we are addressing in this paper is that we are trying to answer how and who migrates due to climate change induced natural disasters, specifically due to floods in Bihar. So main objective of the study is to find the evidences on climate change related migration in Bihar. This is the data variable and methodology. So we have, before going to the field, we have plotted the number of years of floods, basically flood frequency blockwise in the selected districts. So we identified that these are the 4 districts which are needed to be studied, and as per our convenience also we used these districts, and then we chose among top 5 we have chosen 2 blocks from each district, and then we chose villages, and total we had to that. Yeah, this is the entire sample, the sampling method of this particular work. So this is a 3-stage cluster random sampling. The technique that we have used later on in the field, snowball technique, that we approached one local representative in a village, and he told us that we should visit these villages which are more vulnerable, and we can find more evidences on this particular issue. And then we approached to different villages in different districts. So in total we had 400 sample, 100 from each district and 25 from each village. So total 16 villages for 8 blocks in 4 districts of North Bihar. This is the econometric modeling. We have used a simple logic model. Actually, we're trying to use different models. So this work is still in progress. So we'll later add on those findings. But for the time being, we have used a logic model, which is log p probability of migration upon no migration. And logic model is used because it models the success, those who have migrated in comparison to those not who did not migrate because of these particular variables: climatic change, loss due to flood, socioeconomic conditions, and other things. The study selected logic model on the basis of AIC and BIC criteria and the log likelihood values, which was an important condition for choosing the best model. Again, we have this relationship. Our preliminary analysis found that the regression results that confirmed it, that migration is happening because of climatic changes, or maybe floods, directly because of floods in this particular region. All of our variables are significant at 5% level of significance, and it is correct as per the economic theoretical relationship between the variables and the dependent output, that is migration. The conclusion policy implication says that the study finds sufficient evidences on this particular relationship, specifically in case of North Bihar, which was our survey area. And further, we say that no safety nets, limited income diversification mechanisms, less access to government schemes, poor earning and savings, less savings and no savings make these households more vulnerable. And that is why after floods, their condition is very bad, and they are not able to cope up with the situation, so they have to migrate. However, we have found sufficient evidences on migration of male member, but our study could not find enough evidences of complete household migration. Though there is a claim that if the vulnerability will be triggered, then there is likelihood of complete household migration as well in future. In this regard, one of our female respondent in Saharbani in Khagaria district, she says that my husband went for a job, and I quote her, that my husband went for a job and I have 3 children and 2 old age parents, a few cattle and small piece of land, and this hut where we live in. And I do not wish to go because at least we have a roof overhead here, and my husband manages to save some money that he sends us here to survive. In city, living is very costly and we cannot afford it. I also work in agriculture fees as day laborer during agriculture seasons and earn money and support our household expenditure. I may not do the same in the city because I lack the skills and I may not be comfortable doing that. So it was her argument. I unquote her. So we found that there is some the female members are reluctant to opt migration. They are more closely associated with their culture and other things, so they don't wish to go out of their place, even despite they're facing such a massive disaster every year. The beauty of the study lies in the fact that there is no particular study we have come across that dealt with origin to destination based conditions of migrants in the face of climate related migration so far, specifically Indian and Asian region. Further, the policy implication says that the overall study will help, my entire thesis will help the authorities to draw effective and efficient policies to deal with such a crisis, such a huge crisis of sustainability, that is the livelihood, belongingness, the social affiliation, and the identity crisis, that the legal and human rights of a displaced person due to forced migration and displacement in face of any climate-related disasters, the case of floods in North Bihar. Thank you so much. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Richa, for this empirically rich presentation. I will give my comments at the end of the session, so stay on.
Sure.
You'll be getting questions from audience as well. Okay. So
yes,
now
sure.
let me move into next presentation. I think now I like to call upon Ms. Saima Parveen. Saima, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you just start your presentation with your brief introduction, and also you have 10 minutes to present. So,
okay, sir.
Given, 4 out of 7 people, there are only 4 people, so you have a good time to present your research findings.
Okay, sir.
Okay, it's time. Your time starts now. Yes.
सर स्क्रीन शेयर कर सकते हैं हम?
Speak in Hindi, yeah. आप हिंदी में बोल सकती हैं, yes. अपनी इंट्रोडक्शन दे दीजिए. You just introduce yourself, then.
सर मेरा नाम सायमा परवीन है. मैं एमए सेकेंड ईयर की छात्र. मैं एमए सेकेंड ईयर सोशियोलॉजी की छात्र हूँ. मेरा कॉलेज का नाम उदित नारायण पीजी कॉलेज बडौना कुशीनगर उत्तर प्रदेश भारत.
बढ़िया, आप शुरू कर लीजिए.
सर सो हो रहा है?
It's so हो रहा है.
सर मेरा पेपर जलवायु परिवर्तन और पलायन. प्रस्तावना. जलवायु परिवर्तन औसत मौसम पैटर्न में एक दीर्घकालीन परिवर्तन है जो पृथ्वी के स्थानीय, क्षेत्रीय और वैश्विक जलवायु को परिभाषित करती है. जलवायु परिवर्तन न केवल एक पारिस्थितिकी तंत्र और समस्या से जुड़ा है, बल्कि जलवायु परिवर्तन का संबंध समाज के विभिन्न आयामों से है. जलवायु परिवर्तन विकास लक्ष्यों में एकमात्र सबसे बड़ा जोखिम है. जलवायु परिवर्तन के आंतरिक और सीमाओं के बाहर पलायन का अतिरिक्त चालक बनने के परिणाम बढ़ रहे हैं. उद्देश्य. मैंने इस पेपर में जलवायु परिवर्तन से हो रहे समुद्र क्षेत्र में लोगों का पलायन तथा उनके रोजगार एवं स्वास्थ्य पर पड़ रहे प्रभावों का चर्चा किया है. आंकड़ों की व्याख्या. मैंने अपने अध्ययन कार्य को संपन्न करने के लिए द्वितीयक आंकड़ों के संकलन पर आधारित अध्ययन किया है, जिसमें द्वितीयक आंकड़े सरकार के द्वारा विभिन्न रिपोर्ट्स, दस्तावेजें तथा वैज्ञानिकों का मत और अन्य वेबसाइट पर आधारित है. जलवायु परिवर्तन से समुद्र तटीय क्षेत्रों में पलायन. भारत समुद्र क्षेत्र लगभग 7,500 किलोमीटर तक फैला हुआ है, जो सदा अपनी खूबसूरती के लिए प्रसिद्ध रहे हैं. भारत ने 1990 और 2016 के बीच तटीय कटाव के कारण 235 वर्ग किलोमीटर भूमि खो दी है. आंतरिक विस्थापन निगरानी केंद्र के अनुसार 2008 और 2018 के बीच सालाना लगभग 3.6 मिलियन भारतीय विस्थापित हुए मानसून और बारिश के कारण. मई 2019 में प्रमुख चक्रवात पानी ने भारत के पूर्वी तट के साथ एक राज्य उड़ीसा को भी प्रभावित किया, जिसमें 1.2 मिलियन लोग पलायन किए हैं। इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ ट्रॉपिकल मौसम विभाग के एक वैज्ञानिक रास्कल मैथ्यू कोल का मानना है कि जलवायु परिवर्तन समुद्र तटीय क्षेत्रों पर भी प्रभाव पड़ता है। वर्तमान समय में जलवायु परिवर्तन से समुद्र तटों पर होने वाले खतराओं को नजर में रखते हुए RMSI ने इंटर गवर्नमेंट पैनल क्लाइमेट चेंज की 6वीं मूल्यांकन रिपोर्ट क्लाइमेट चेंज 2021 द फिजिकल साइंस बेसिक ने मुंबई, कोची, तिरुवनंतपुरम पर विचार करते हुए शहर के लिए एक उच्च रेजोल्यूशन डिजिटल टेरेन मॉडल तैयार किया। IPCC रिपोर्ट के अनुसार भारत के चारों ओर समुद्र का स्तर 2050 तक बढ़ जाएगा। जलवायु परिवर्तन के कारण समुद्र तटीय क्षेत्र में लोगों का रोजगार और स्वास्थ्य प्रभावित। IIT की रिपोर्ट भारत सरकार विज्ञान व तकनीकी विभाग के समर्थक क्लाइमेट चेंज प्रोग्राम के तहत किए गए अध्ययनों में शामिल वैज्ञानिक की टीम ने अपनी रिपोर्ट में कहा कि तेज हवाओं की वजह से समुद्र का खारा पानी तटीय इलाकों में पहुंचकर भूमर्गी मीठे पानी से मिल जाएगा। इससे बड़े पैमाने पर फसलें नष्ट हो जाएंगी। इसका आर्थिक सामाजिक स्थिति पर प्रतिकूल असर होगा। पृथ्वी विज्ञान मंत्रालय की एक रिपोर्ट के अनुसार पश्चिम हिंद महासागर में गर्मी की लहरें बढ़ी हैं। समुद्र जीव वैज्ञानिक वर्धन पटनाकल कहते हैं जैसे जैसे तापमान बढ़ता है तो वैसे वैसे महासागरों की रासायनिक संरचना भी बदलाव होता है। यह बदलाव मछलियों की प्रजनन क्षमता को भी बदल देती है, जिससे मछलियों की आबादी पर सीधा प्रभाव पड़ता है। IPCC लेखक सुशांत क्लेटन बताते हैं कि जंगल आग और बाढ़ से प्रभावित लोगों के बीच पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक स्टेट डिसऑर्डर, चिंता और अवसाद में बढ़ोतरी देखी गई। उदाहरण, भारत में 1919 में उड़ीसा में आए सुपर साइक्लोन के एक साल बाद भारतीय शोधकर्ताओं ने अपने शोध में पाया कि अच्छी खासी संख्या में किशोरी लड़कियों में पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक डिसऑर्डर पाया गया। वर्किंग ग्रुप की सेकेंड रिपोर्ट में जलवायु परिवर्तन से प्रभावित आबादी में चिंता और तनाव सहित अन्य मानसिक स्वास्थ्य संबंधित चुनौतियों पर ध्यान देने पर जोर दिया गया। निष्कर्ष, जलवायु परिवर्तन के कारण पर्यावरण, मानवीय गतिविधियों तथा समुद्र जीव पर नकारात्मक प्रभाव पड़ता है, जिसके चलते लोग पलायन कर रहे हैं। जलवायु परिवर्तन मछुआरे समुदाय के लोगों में जलवायु परिवर्तन मछुआरे समुदाय के लोग अत्यधिक प्रभावित हो रहे हैं, जिनके कारण उन्हें अन्य रोजगार अपनाने के लिए विवश हैं। जलवायु परिवर्तन न केवल रोजगार को प्रभावित करता है, बल्कि मनुष्य के स्वास्थ्य को भी प्रभावित करता है। जलवायु परिवर्तन एक वैश्विक समस्या है जो हमारे जीवन शैली में परिवर्तन के एक प्रमुख कारण बनती जा रही है। अगर हम इस समस्या को गंभीरता से नहीं लेते हैं तो आने वाले समय में हमारी पृथ्वी तथा उन पर रहने वाले जीव जंतु को भारी नुकसान का सामना करना पड़ जाएगा। थैंक यू।
Saima, thank you for your presentation. I have few comments to make. मैं आपका comments मैं बाद में दे दूंगा। अभी आप chat room में बैठ जाइए, ठीक है? आपकी सवाल भी लोग पूछेगा, ठीक है?
Okay, sir.
Thank you. धन्यवाद. So now let's move into next presentation. So I'll just like to call upon Fatma Khatun. She's going to present on COVID-19, women's and workers' health and migration. Miss Fatma, are you there? Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Open up your video and start your presentation with a brief introduction about yourself.
Yes, sir.
You are given 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to present.
Yes, sir. गुड इवनिंग एवरीवन। मेरा नाम फातिमा खातून है और मैं एमए सोशियोलॉजी सेकेंड ईयर की छात्रा हूँ। मेरे कॉलेज का नाम उदित नारायण पीजी कॉलेज पटना कुशीनगर है। मेरा टॉपिक है कोविड-19 स्वास्थ्य और प्रवास। कोविड-19 एक ऐसे संकट के रूप में उभर रहा है जिसने पूरे मानव के जीवन के सभी क्षेत्रों को प्रभावित किया। खासकर यदि हम देखें तो स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र में इसका अधिक प्रकोप रहा है। इस महामारी ने आजीविका और अस्तित्व के मामले में दुनिया के सबसे ज्यादा गरीब आबादी के लोगों को असमान रूप से प्रभावित किया। ज्यादातर कोविड-19 के दौरान ग्रामीण महिलाएं, श्रमिक वर्ग और गरीब किसान प्रभावित हुए। जैसा कि विश्व स्वास्थ्य संगठन जून 2020 का मानना है कि दुनिया भर में कोरोना वायरस के संक्रमण के अब तक 74 लाख से भी ज्यादा मामलों की पुष्टि हो चुकी है और 4,18,000 लोगों की मौत हो चुकी है। कोविड-19 स्वास्थ्य और प्रवास मेरे इस टॉपिक का उद्देश्य है।
Fatma, you have to move the screen. आप स्क्रीन मतलब चेंज कर लीजिए या स्लाइड चेंज कर लीजिए।
Yes, now I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Yes.
अभी सही है, अभी तीसरा स्लाइड पे। यस
सर, मेरे इस टॉपिक का उद्देश्य यही है कि मैं इस टॉपिक के माध्यम से महिला प्रवासी और श्रमिकों और उनके परिवार पर कोविड-19 के प्रभाव की पड़ताल करना चाहती हूँ। देन महिला प्रवासी कामगारों पर पड़ने वाले प्रभाव और उनके अनुभव के बारे में विस्तृत रूप से व्याख्या करना है। इस पेपर में हम यह पहला अध्ययन करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों से पलायन करने वाले लोग कौन से हैं, उनकी सामाजिक आर्थिक स्थिति क्या है। दूसरा कि जो गांव से लोगों का शहरों की तरफ पलायन करने के बाद गांव के सामाजिक ढांचे में क्या परिवर्तन आया है। तीसरा यह जानने की हम कोशिश करेंगे कि क्या ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों की शिक्षा पलायन और बेरोजगारी को बढ़ावा देती है। उपरोक्त सभी प्रश्नों को समझने के लिए प्राथमिक और द्वितीयक दोनों तरह के आंकड़ों पर आधारित संकलन किया है। प्राथमिक आंकड़ों को यदि हम देखें तो गांव के विभिन्न क्षेत्रों और काम करने वाले लोग जो शहरों में कई सालों तक रहकर आए हैं और उनके साक्षात्कार पर आधारित है। और द्वितीय आंकड़े सरकार की विभिन्न रिपोर्ट्स, न्यूज़पेपर की क्लिप और दस्तावेजों पर आधारित है। कोविड-19 और प्रवास। कैसे कोविड-19 और माइग्रेशन हुआ इंडिया में। कोरोना संक्रमण के बाद इन प्रवासी मजदूरों का बड़ा हिस्सा शहरों में मलिन बस्तियों और अन्य हाशिए के इलाके में रहने लगा। देशव्यापी तालाबंदी के बीच लाखों प्रवासी श्रमिक को पैदल ही अपने गृह स्थान की ओर भागना पड़ा। यह निराशाजनक था कि इस यात्रा के दौरान कई लोग भूख से तड़प उठे और अपनी जान भी गंवा दी। ऐसा नहीं था कि शहरों में पलायन करने के बाद भी वह सुरक्षित थे। समाज में अधिकतर परिवार खेती मजदूरी पर निर्भर है और वे लगातार 16 से 18 घंटे काम करते हैं, जिसमें खासकर महिलाओं के ऊपर कार्य का बोझ अत्यधिक रहता है। महिलाओं को दिन भर खेतों में काम करना पड़ता है तथा वे इन सब कार्यों को करने के बाद फिर घर का भी सारा काम करती हैं। ऐसे में 12 जून 2020 में विश्व स्वास्थ्य संगठन WHO एजेंसी ने कोविड-19 का सर्वेक्षण किया तथा निम्न और मध्य आय वाले देशों में कोरोना का प्रकोप तेजी से फैलने के बीच महिलाओं, युवाओं और किशोरों पर इसके अप्रत्यक्ष रूप से पड़ने वाले असर पर भी चिंता व्यक्त की। सबसे ज्यादा कोरोना काल में हो रहे सबसे ज्यादा अगर मामलों को देखा जाए तो समस्याओं को देखा जाए तो गर्भवती महिलाओं की स्थिति इस काल में सबसे ज्यादा बुरी रही। विश्व स्वास्थ्य संगठन एजेंसी के महानिदेशक टेड्रोस एडहेनॉम घेब्रेयसस का कहना है कि जिन देशों में महामारी फैलने से स्वास्थ्य प्रणालियों पर बोझ बढ़ा है, वहां महिलाएं और बच्चों के स्वास्थ्य के प्रति चिंता बढ़ गई है, जिनके लिए स्वास्थ्य सेवाओं तक पहुंच पाना एक चुनौती है। मैं इस टॉपिक का निष्कर्ष ये है कि कोविड-19 महामारी का दुनिया भर के लोगों पर सर्वव्यापी प्रभाव पड़ा है। हालांकि आबादी के कमजोर वर्ग महामारी से असामान्य रूप से प्रभावित हुए हैं और भारत जैसे देशों में प्रवासी कामगारों का मामला गंभीर चिंता का विषय है। वर्तमान अध्ययन भारत में कोविड-19 के दौरान प्रवासी महिलाओं के अनुभव का पता लगाना दस्तावेजीकरण है। शहरी बस्तियों में जीवन में प्रवासी महिलाओं और उनके परिवारों को उचित सामाजिक दूरी बनाए रखने के संबंध में विकल्पों के साथ छोड़ दिया गया। अतः यह कहा जा सकता है कि कोविड-19 के बचाव के संक्षेप में स्वास्थ्य पर विशेष रूप से ध्यान देने की आवश्यकता है। महिलाओं तथा प्रवासी श्रमिकों को कोरोना काल में अत्यंत गंभीर समस्याओं का सामना करना पड़ा, जिसने भारत के विकास पर भी प्रतिकूल प्रभाव डाला। इसके लिए मैंने जो अपने रिपोर्ट्स, जो मैंने अपने सारे डाटा को जहां से कलेक्ट किया, उसके लिए मैंने कुछ रेफरेंसेस यहाँ पे दिए हैं सर। ओके, थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you, Ms. Fatma, for your presentation of health के तरफ, women's health, and how COVID-19 induced migration of women, all the, we'll discuss it at the end of the session. And now I'd like to call upon I think the third one in the schedule, like what, Manisha Sharma, she's there, and she's going to present on the scenario of internal displaced people in India, its linkages with natural disasters in last 2 decades. Manisha, you start your presentation with a brief introduction about yourself. It's a joint paper, and you are given 10 minutes. So open your video and also your presentation. Your time starts now. You have 10 minutes, so you can.
So it's showing most disabled participants in sharing.
Yeah, I think. Okay.
Manisha, can you now share PPT?
Yes, sir.
Fatma, Manisha, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just do it.
Hello, good evening. My name is Manisha. I am a research scholar at International Institute for Population Sciences, Mumbai, and I am working on the gender and migration issue. So, what topic is the scenario of international displaced people in India and its linkage with natural disaster in the last
Manisha,
decade.
आपकी voice break हो रही है.
Sir, I have network issue. Hello. Hello.
Manisha, सही है. आपकी voice सही. Maybe you can just close your video. आप पसंद कर लीजिए.
Okay, sir. No. Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Introduction. Moment of people can be attributed to the migration concepts such as migration and common place for a period for various purposes. Essentially in place with the various social, economic, political, and cultural sectors. Internal displacement in the form of migration can be forced migration or completely voluntary. It is within the context of climate change. Forced migration might include permanent displacement with temporary placement. Displacement and voluntary migration include climate events that only temporarily disrupt livelihood. Whatever the displacement of places will go on events such as drought and land degradation or rapid
It's
fast
not
onset
understandable, Sadanand. We can't understand what is being said.
See, can you?
It's not clear. I think and the PowerPoint may be closed since it is reading of the text. She can read it and we can just hear.
Yes, you can close the PowerPoint so that you can present only. Okay.
So we have used the internal displacement monitoring center data for gathering about the relocation of people with disaster. And we use the level 10 displacement from the analytical approach include vibrate and disturbed population to see the space in India and the states. And this I am not able to show you the table, but this like first table shows in the region with 1.7 crore IDP internally displaced persons. This is of most internal displaced people, many from West Bengal, Odisha, followed by northeastern region. 1.4 crore IDPs are belong to the state of Assam, southern region, consisting mainly the state of Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, showing 58 lakhs IDP displacement, and western region with Maharashtra state has around 11 lakhs IDP displaced also. And now this is the total number of displaced by the flood from 2011 to 2022. Flood is a form of natural disaster.
Manisha, hold on. So your voice is breaking again. So can you just close your video and also, other device? I think, have you opened 2 devices or what?
No, it's only one device.
Then you speak slowly because we are not able to hear you. And also, we don't know, you have to, who are you? You have to introduce yourself. Just tell me about the introduction. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Sir, I'm Manisha. I am a research scholar from the International Institute for Population Sciences, Mumbai, and I am working on the gender and migration.
Okay, good. Now you just speak slowly. Yes.
Okay. So for this presentation, we have gathered data from the International Displaced Monitoring Center for the year 2011 to 2022. Here we are showing like different region-wise number of displacement persons. We can see the eastern region with 1.7 crore internally displaced people consists of both the internal people mainly from the West Bengal, Odisha state of India, followed by northeastern region. 1.4 crore IDPs are belong to the state of Assam. Southern region consists mainly the state of Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, showing 68 lakh IDP displaced, and western region with Maharashtra state has around 11 lakhs IDP displaced people. And this next figure shows the total number of displacement by flood from 2011 to 2022. Flood is a form of natural disaster mostly influence the displacement of people in India. A monsoon flood mainly impacted the northeastern region, 49%, followed by eastern region, 31%. The retreating monsoon rainfall in winter affected the southern region, 14%, while northern region, 30%. Next, the total number of displacement by cyclone from 2011 to 2022. The tropical cyclone of Bay of Bengal mainly impact the eastern region 72%, followed by southern region 22%. The cyclone formation in Arabian Sea affect the western region 4%, while northern eastern region 1%. Another. Next, the total number of displacement by other disasters. In this figure, other natural disasters like include drought, earthquake, landslide, affect the displacement of people in India. Earthquake and landslide in Sikkim and West Bengal mainly impact the eastern region, 45%, followed by northern region, 24%. Next, the total damage and loss due to flood and cyclone in India. This figure shows the region-wise distribution of human life loss. It is found that northern region has lost maximum human lives, followed by central eastern region. In distribution of cattle lost, head lost, southern region has top position, followed by eastern northern region. Most of the houses were damaged in eastern region of India, followed by southern region. While central region has experienced maximum crop area affected, followed by southern region. And next figure shows the total fund provided by the government of India. In this figure, we found that northern region has received highest funds to overcome natural events, followed by eastern region, that is 16,000 crore fund. And western, southern, and central region received 15, 14, and 13,000 crores respectively.
Manisha, sorry to intervene. Have you closed your video?
Yes, sir.
And you speak slowly because I get messages from the audience. They are not able to hear you properly. So, you have time. So you just speak slowly. Okay. Then only we can hear you well. Yeah. Okay.
This figure shows the total funds provided by Government of India. So we found that northern region has received highest 19,000 crore funds to overcome natural events, followed by eastern region with 16,000 crore funds. and respectively Western, Southern, and Central region received 15, 14, and 13,000 crore, while Northeast region received lowest, that is 5,000 crore funds to overcome the situation of natural disasters. Major findings. Damage due to disaster is most important focus of the study. We found that house loss due to disaster has mostly reported from eastern and southern regions, while cattle loss due to disaster are mostly reported from southern and central region of India. But the loss of human life was mostly reported from eastern and central region. Moreover, the crops were reportedly lost in central region of India. Talking about funds provided by Government of India to overcome the situation is high for northern region, followed by eastern, western, southern, and central region. Very less amount of funds are provided for the region north region states. The cyclone leads displacement is maximum for the eastern region, and that northern and central region is low. Moreover, we can see displacement for other natural events is also high for eastern region and lowest for northern region. In various instances of flood-induced filtration to the channel size, location, and pattern may be seen in the indigenous Ganga Brahmaputra plains. Low-lying location on Indian east coast increase the severity of floods to spray rise in water level during cyclone season. Major river basin like Mahanadi River in Odisha, the Hooghly in West Bengal, and the Eastern Godavari in Andhra Pradesh increase the vulnerability of the affected coastal region to sea level rise and ensuring flooding. Which the coastal states in the east are more susceptible to tropical cyclone frequency and intensity. From the year 2021 to 2026, with a total outlay of Rs 1452 crore, the government of India has accepted 50,000 for confirmation of the
Manisha, you have 2 minutes more.
Has accepted the proposal for continuation of the 7 planned sub-teams under the umbrella scheme, relief and rehabilitation of migrants and refugees. Conclusion. After going results and discussion, this paper as a natural disaster has a strong link with the internally displaced peoples. Over the past decade, the effect of climate change has increased the related number of events into natural disasters. Therefore, occurrence of natural disasters such as flood and cyclone were more frequent as compared to other natural disasters. As now, large number of people is internally displaced by flood and cyclone rather than other events. Most vulnerable region is like the eastern region followed by southern and northeastern region due to flood and cyclones. Mostly people were displaced from the eastern region due to huge damage of houses. Government provided the displacement people is highest among the northern region, followed by eastern region in India, while lowest in the northeast region, where displacement people is highest due to flood. Policymakers should take care of location of government provided among vulnerable regions. Limitation. Data is provided from the internal displaced monitoring center about natural disasters. Space damage and government allocation funding for cooking from the damage only in the state and national level. This data is not provided information about allocated funds and NGOs. This paper is showing only region-wise number of natural disaster event and internally displaced people due to major natural disasters from 2011 to 2022 in India. Study has limited information about impact flood in the displaced as natural event because action of flood and cyclone has long-term effect during a long time, and the study only restricted in last past decades. But the study had a scope to explore how much people were displaced due to drought in India over the past decade.
Can you come to the conclusion, Manisha?
Sir, it's over. Thank you, sir.
And also, because you have to send us the PowerPoint because we need your PowerPoint. Because we could not hear you properly.
Okay, sir.
So you send us the PowerPoint, but you stay back, and we will be asking you questions. I'll give my comments as well. There'll be question answer session from the audience. I like to call upon next presenter. Mr. Imran, are you there?
Am I audible, sir?
Imran.
Yes, am I audible?
Audible. You're audible. You're audible.
Okay, fine. Let me share my PPT first.
Imran, just mic is on.
Yes, sir. My PPT is visible. My PPT is visible, sir?
Yeah. It has started, yes.
Okay, good evening to everyone. My name is Imran Khan, and I'm a PhD scholar in Department of Economics, Jamia Millia Islamia. And we have just done a little work that is related to the COVID. My topic is the mental health status of Indian migrants worker in the United Arab Emirates during the COVID-19 pandemic. This paper has been shared with my Professor Ashraf Ilyan with me. So just a minute. So we know that migration has become a de facto phenomena in the contemporary globalized world, and India is not untouched. According to the census 2011, around 37% of the India's population are migrants, including the interstate migration. Internal migration in India is about 100 million, and a significant portion of migration from India to the overseas can be observed. According to the Population Division of UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs reported, titled as International Migration 2020, the Indian diaspora is the biggest diaspora over the world. According to the report, 18 million people are living outside of India. And another data by MEA, around 3.5 million Indians are living in UAE, constituting around 30% of the after the oil boom in the Gulf during the 1970s, the countries basically started spending huge amount on the development, and for that development, they need so much of the labor. In India, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are the two states which share the largest burden of migration. People from these regions migrate in search of prosperous financial stability and better prospect. The ongoing pandemic has decreased the new flow of international migration and raised the number of returning migrants, which has happened for the first time in the contemporary world. According to an estimate by the World Bank, around 50 to 60,000 people from urban India were moved to the rural areas due to uncertainty and job losses during the lockdown period. World Bank estimates that the government of India repatriates around 7 lakh of their migrants through the special flight. And we also know that the migrants in any community basically affected the most during any pandemic. Therefore, it is important for us to analyze the impact of the coronavirus on the Indian migrant workers. These are the literature review. I'm just skipping this. Directly coming to the research gap. According to the literature review, what we have find that there are a few studies who were basically dealing with the psychological impact on the migrant workers. The few studies we basically find that is related to the Indian migrants, especially from the Kerala. The scope of this proposed study, how COVID-19 impacted psychologically those migrants who are from the North India, from the Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And they were available in UAE during the lockdown period of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have basically two objectives. The first is to explore the impact of coronavirus on salary reduction of Indian migrants worker working in UAE. And the second one is to analyze the mental health of the Indian migrants worker in UAE during the coronavirus pandemic. So these are the hypotheses we are going to test basically. So the research methodology is this investigation is totally quantitative.
Yes, can you, Imran, just show me again the hypothesis? I want to look at it.
Yes, this is the hypothesis. There is no significant difference in the mental health of the migrant workers across different ages. There is a significant difference in the mental health of the migrant workers of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And there is no significant difference in the mental health of the migrant workers, which has the different number of dependent person. And there is no significant difference in the mental health of the migrant workers in the different occupation. These are the four hypotheses.
Okay.
So research methodology, this investigation is quantitative and based on a sample survey approach. A total 200 male migrant samples were collected through a structured questionnaire. A snowball sampling technique was used to collect the primary data, and to a statistical analysis and descriptive statistics like chi-square test was done while using SPSS version 28. So this is the demographic profile of the sample migrants. What we find is like 51% of the sample migrants were below the age of 40, rest 47% were the above of age 40. However, 89% of the migrants were following the Islam and 10% were Hindus. The educational background of the these sample migrants were 9% were not educated, 12% were just able to read and write, 15% 10th level degree, 27% 12th level, 30% graduate, and 3% were the postgraduate. This is the occupational composition of the sample migrant workers. 31% were the white collar workers, white collar job. 63% were the blue collar jobs, and 6% of the sample migrants were the professionals and the businessmen, we can say. So we also try to look at the experiences, like how many years they are basically working in the UAE. So we find that 26% of the workers were working below the 4 years, 49% were working for 4 to 8 years, and 24% were working in UAE for last 8 hours or 8 years or more than that. So this is the earning and the remittance pattern. Like 23% of the sample migrants were just earning less than 1500 AED. However, 43% reported their earning between 1500 to 2500 AED, and only 30% were earning above 2500 AED. However, the remittances is like half of the respondent migrants says that they were remitting just below.
Imran, sorry to intervene. Can you, because we have 2 more minutes to go, so you have 2 more minutes left. So can you just come to the conclusion and tell us the main highlights of your presentation, because we need to have a discussion for 5 minutes.
Fine. So we also try to find out the earning losses during the lockdown. Like 16% were reported no loss, 75% were reported a loss less than 1000 AED, and only 7% were reported a loss of more than 1000 AED. So let us come to the mental health of the migrants worker. We have basically asked several questions to the migrants. So 73% were reported they were felt nervous during the lockdown period. 62% felt depressed. Similarly, 76% felt lonely. 88% were feeling hopeful about the future. 63% were reported hard time sleeping. 63% were 62.9% reported disabilities in the concentration during the lockdown period of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the correlation coefficient result. This is the first one is basically related to the age. So what we find that the mental health and the age of the migrants were basically negatively related, and it is a statistically significant. Similarly, like the educational qualification and the mental health of the migrant, somehow it is related to the there is a positive relation. However, feeling hopeful and difficulties in concentration was negatively related. However, felt hopeful were not statistically significant. Hard time sleeping is not statistically significant. What we find is the felt nervous is the significant only. The rest, we also try to find out the correlation between the domicile, like the people from the Bihar and the Uttar Pradesh, and their mental health status. So we find there is a negative relationship between both, and it is basically statistically significant, because we can also relate their mental health through the spread of coronavirus in their respective state as well, so that the response may be differ. The correlation between the number of dependent person on the people is also found to be statistically significant, and there is a positive relationship between that. So this is basically chi-square test. What we find here is that chi-square test between the people of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, they were basically their feeling is statistically significant. Similarly, the number of dependents, they have also the difference in the opinions, and their occupation, it is also found to be like their opinion are different. There are some limitations of this study, because the study is based on only 200 and sample.
Imran, sorry to intervene, because we are running short of the closing session time. No? Just can you just come to the conclusion?
Just let us come to the policy implication of it. Like I will basically.
Yeah.
So the finding of this result of the sample study basically draw attention towards the official and the policy makers to basically do the needful provision to the targeted psychological affected community. The study recommended creating awareness among the people by using social networking sites and diagnosing them the mental disorder on an urgent basis. The government should make arrangements for counselors and psychiatrists with the free consultation with easy access. The government of UAE should also direct the industries to hire counselors who employ the international migrants, and to create awareness among the community to how to deal and behave with the person with a mental disorder. The government should take initiative to form some social groups along with the social reformers and influencing people at the panchayat level. These are the conclusions basically. These are some references. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. Sorry to push you to close it because we are running out of time, because I got a message from the organizer. Hello.
No issues. Yes.
I have to close the session. So I just, as a chair, I have my duty to give my comments on all the papers. The first paper, Professor Mehta, Rani Mehta, presented on health hazards. It's a macro perspective. Can you all see me? I mean, am I audible? Because I feel a little lost. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
So Professor Rani Mehta, are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm there.
Ma'am, actually your paper was a very macro perspective. It was a macro perspective, but I think as you can include some case studies and you cover some micro study that will be really, it'll enrich your paper. That's what, while submitting the paper, you can include, some case studies, and or you can say that little ethnographic kind of thing, if you add into your paper, it'll be good paper. That's what, because I just have a very, I think you can do that while resubmitting the paper for the publication. And coming to the next paper, I think Richa's paper was really, empirically rich. And I think, Richa, I like to know, you should include, which social group was the most affected by this climate change in Bihar, like, the Dalits or the OBCs, that kind of, who are the migrants. You said male migrants and female migrants. I think you should include the cost also, like in that factor will be really good. Who is the more vulnerable to this climate change in North Bihar? Okay, that will be
okay,
good.
sir.
And
Sir, that's included in the paper, but due to paucity of time, I could not present.
Anyway, you can do that. And also, it was very empirically very rich paper. Empirically very rich paper. It was really good. And coming to the paper of Saima, Parveen, and Fatma, actually, both of you, gave a very, wide picture because you are postgraduate student. So I understand, but you have to narrow down, your topic. And I think you all, indicated various reports. I mean, examples, and also you gave the pictures from the reports. Government reports are good, but when you do research, you have to focus on particular issue, and also you should go deeper in that. Okay, maybe you can do that in future conferences. So that's what, because we are running out of time, so I can't get into the details of your paper presentation. And coming to the presentation of what's her name, Manisha. Manisha, you provide regional perspective, like Northeast region, Southern region. I mean, the demographic picture was very interesting, but we could not hear you properly. And I think should make it next time, come in advance and be prepared to present your paper and check your connections and all. That'll be really good for you. And we could not hear you much about your paper. And coming to Imran's paper, it was very good. And I want to know, Imran, have you done the field work, or how? Like, did you go to UAE? How? Like, let me know.
No, sir. It was actually the snowball sampling techniques were basically used because the data was collected during the lockdown period in the UAE. So it was not possible to travel to the UAE. So we basically, we just use the snowball techniques to basically collect the data. The people we basically know, we ask them to like circulate or get in connected with them, and we basically collect the data.
One thing I'll tell you, since lack of time, I could not, check whether you have really, proved your hypothesis in your study. I mean, in your study, I'm not able to, know that at the end. Have you really, have you falsified the hypothesis, or have you, supported the hypothesis? I like to know whether, because you just had 4 hypotheses. I think hypothesis should be 3. I mean, like 3 or 4, that's fine. But I was not very still clear whether you just got the data to prove your hypothesis. Did you find it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We find it, and we basically reject the null hypothesis in all the 4 cases.
Okay, okay. So you're from economics background or from?
Yes, sir. I'm from economic background in Department of Economics, Jamia Millia Islamia.
That's okay.
In Delhi, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, it was good presentation. I need little bit interpretation from your end. I mean, Imran, just, you got data, okay, fine.
Right.
But, try to interpret in the light of, other studies, like, how the mental, I mean, like, good, you were just, I saw the educational level and other level, other variations, but still, you have to increase your interpretation of your data. That's what
because of the shortage of the time, like we basically left with so many things. But in my final paper, when we basically go for the publication, I will be including all these things.
Yes. So this session we had a paper, macro perspective and micro perspective, as well as empirical, studies from Bihar and other places, like like Manisha presented from different regions. And also it's a very interesting session. Some papers were on climate migrants, and some papers were on mental health issues and health hazards. Okay. Thank you. And also my best wishes to all of you to rewrite your, I mean, like, just include these comments, this lacuna, and just try to resubmit the paper to the committee, which will accept your papers. Now, I like to request Professor Binod Kadaria, if he's there. Sir, can you just give your comments, please? Could you please?
Thank you, Dr. Mahalingam. I'm conscious that time is running out, and we are into very soon we'll be into the closing session.
Yes, sir.
So yes, it was a very diverse session in terms of presentation, but I was pleasantly surprised by the Hindi presentations. So ये हिंदी में जो सुना गया काफी अच्छी हिंदी थी. इसमें मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि the terminology that is being used is a literal translation from English to Hindi, and that's not the right thing to do. Like palayan, palayan is used. Palayan is running away. It's not pravas. So the other presenter used that terminology pravas is also very, very important. So I think it is very important to choose the correct terminology and independently of the English. That is very important. But you are right in saying that these are at the postgraduate level, and these were in fact just describing the issues rather than going into critical analysis. That I think was something which we expect, but otherwise the topics are very important, particularly women and children. Children's issue is very, very important. And tsunami, I think tsunami should have been referred to. That was like coastal regions in erosion and so on. So all these are important issues. Rise in salinity and IPCC, reference to the IPCC report up to 2050 are important flags, I should say. But this should be discussed much more. Professor Rani Mehta's paper was very, very comprehensive. And what impressed me most was her, interlinkages between family planning and climate change within the population dynamics. So, but I suppose as you said, it was only presented for 7 minutes, and the time was not utilized fully. So I hope that we get another chance sometime later to listen to Professor Rani Mehta's full presentation. North Bihar climate migrant from IIT Roorkee, as you said, is a rich empirical paper in terms of what was there, but I think time was short to listen to the whole presentation. That's there also. I think we need to have more interpretation, more on interpretation, because I know, and when, particularly this is my humble suggestion to the presenter, that you should anticipate who your audience are. They are not technical people. They won't understand your quantitative economics or econometrics and things like that. So, and when you have time constraint, you have to be very, very choosy in terms of how you are going to use your every minute. And that's where you should come straight away to your conclusion first, and then try to say why those conclusions. Just reverse the presentation. That, I think, is a technique that would help you in future. And one more important point is, and that applies to Imran Khan's presentation also, all those presentations, were they worth the exercise that you have taken? They are, that the conclusions are already something that are, in the public domain. So what you perhaps should look for is a counterintuitive finding in that. You can say that these results are, anyway expected, but this one result was something which was mind-boggling, which was not normal. That, I think, will make your presentation much more valuable, at the same time interesting. Because again, as I said in the earlier session, that we need to think that all that knowledge we are generating through these presentations should be implementable. We should leverage them in terms of converting the wisdom into practice, as William has said yesterday. But certainly I can see that they are all rich presentations, a lot of potential there. All that needs to be done is little tweaking here and there. I think that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable comments. It was great listening to you. And I think, you really
there to give vote of thanks.
Yeah. So that's fine, sir. It was a good session. And I think I look forward to the closing session now. Let's go to the closing session.
Any sentence, single sentence, you can just give vote
closing.
of thanks. Are you there, Simran?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Good evening, everyone. And it has been an absolute delight to be part of this engaging session on climate change and migration. On behalf of GRFTT, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed chair, Dr. M. Malingam, and to the brilliant speakers who enlightened us on this pressing issue. Lastly, thank you all for participating and for their time, for making this a session memorable. Thank you so much.
Please join in the closing session that is already started there. I have sent the link. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all. Let's go to the next room.
Next.